Emergency Management Association. I am happy to have you here in the Coastal Bend, where we have Chamber of Commerce weather every day. The Coastal Bend Emergency Management Association, in cooperation with numerous government and non-government partners, is pleased to announce the return of the Coastal Bend Hurricane Virtual Conference. The Coastal Bend Hurricane Conference has a great success because it ensures all community stakeholders have access to high quality training and networking that is typically only available at larger, more expensive state and national level conferences. The Coastal Bend Hurricane Emergency Management Association has organized this online conference to share what is new and relevant for the coming hurricane season. This will serve as training to share resources and contacts. And of course, many thanks to our financial sponsors. For every one of our 10 years, HEB has been there for us as our lead sponsor. We truly could not do this without them. And just to go through our sponsors here at the beginning, our lead sponsor, of course, is HEB. Our Category 5 sponsor is the Port of Corpus Christi Authority. Our Category 4 sponsor is Cheniere Energy. And then Category 3 is AEP Texas. Category 2, we're lucky enough to have 2 sponsors in that category. It's Allegiance Mobile Health and Spa Glass. And then Category 1, we have a whole host of sponsors that came in at that level. The City of Corpus Christi, Nueces County LEPC, Vallejo, Bill Greehey Refineries, CTEH, Emergency Response. And then our tropical storm sponsors are Crowder Golf, Driscoll's Children's Hospital, and Texas State Aquarium. You can see that on the slide that's up right now. Our in-person conference format in the past has served us well. The Coastal Bend region took a direct hit from Harvey in Hurricane Harvey in a Category 4 with no direct loss of life. The region has not been so fortunate with COVID-19. We continue to live with a pandemic. Because of this, Sabima has come together in the same format as last year. And we would love to have all of our committed speakers for in-person presentation at this online event. However, we're going from around 60 speaker spots over 2 days to approximately 15 speakers in a little over 3 hours. So we are currently scheduled for May 4th and 5th, 2022, back in Robstown in person. So the conference committee reflected on this past year and wants to concentrate on lessons learned and best practices from multiple storm challenges we all faced. From an exceptional active storm with 9 named storms entering the Gulf in 2020, to living and working with a pandemic, to our most recent winter storm. Given all our collective experiences and needs, the committee wanted to focus on 3 areas to help guide you into our 2021 hurricane season. So these 3 areas that we have are, first will be whole community planning, real world response, and then virtual coordination. Attendees can submit questions to the panelists in the chat. Time is limited. We plan to have some Q&A after each panel. We intend to address questions submitted in a recap document that will be published after the conference. Please note that this is a live event and it is being recorded. So opening session followed by 3 panels with short intermission in between the panels. That's our basic breakdown for this. The breaks also allow us to recognize our sponsors. Each panel features a moderator who is experienced facilitator representing the broad interests of many stakeholders in their area of expertise. Selected panelists are subject matter experts from the field of emergency management, health, medical, private sector, state agency, and non-governmental organizations. So I want to introduce our panelists. The first one that we'll have up is Ronnie Gunnar Retzlaff. is retired from the United States Navy after 24 years of service. He is a civil servant with the Department of the Navy and emergency manager at the Naval Air Station Corpus Christi. Ron has been married to his high school sweetheart for 39 years, is a father of 3, grandpa to 3, proud American, proud Texan, Navy veteran, and dedicated civil servant. Gary Barney, for our second panel, is the Texas Division Emergency Management District Coordinator in District 20, Corpus Christi. He started his career in 1987 in the fire service in El Paso, Texas, serving the community and obtaining the rank of captain on the El Paso Fire Department. Gary has assisted on a wide variety of incidents throughout the state, from wildfires, hurricanes, flooding events, tornadoes, and other disasters, as well as planned events such as Super Bowls, Formula One racing, and NASCAR events. Our third panelist moderator will be Mrs. Danielle Hale, has served in various public safety roles over the past 20 years and has responded to numerous disasters throughout the state. Now, as the Port of Corpus Christi Emergency Manager, she works to institutionalize the National Incident Management System throughout the port community and enhancing regional collaboration. She is married with 3 children who all support her hectic career. So now we're into our first presentation here during our general session. And it's from our partners at the local weather service here in Corpus Christi. John Metz, who will be starting this, is the meteorologist in charge of the National Weather Service in Corpus Christi. John leads a team of meteorologists who provide life-saving weather forecasts and warnings to the South Texas community. He works closely with the media, emergency managers, and other local, state, and federal officials to ensure that South Texas communities are ready when hurricanes, floods, or other hazardous weather threatens. He's worked with the National Weather Service for 28 years. Following him will be Melissa Huffman, and she is the warning coordinator meteorologist at the National Weather Service. She has extensive experience forecasting and communicating weather information within the state of Texas, having worked with the National Weather Service for more than 10 years. She earned an MPA from the University of North Texas in emergency management and graduated with a bachelor's in meteorological climatology. John, over to you.
Thank you, RJ. Well, welcome folks to the Coastal Bend Hurricane Conference. We are 4 weeks from the start of the conference, from the start of the season, and hopefully will not be such a devastating one as last year, but it is time to get prepared. So hopefully you'll be able to see the slides coming up here. But folks, this is hurricane country. We've had 65 hurricanes hit the Texas coast in the historical record. And so that is a significant amount of impacts for Texas. This year's topic is multiple storm hazard. And so if we go to the next slide, you can see that on 27 seasons, we've had 2 or more storms to hit the Texas coast. In 5 of those seasons in the historical record, there have been 2 or more hurricanes in the same season. And one season had 4 hurricanes. That was 1886. We don't want to repeat that one, but it's important to be prepared for more than one storm. Next slide. So folks, it's been 4 years since Harvey, and don't get complacent. The complacency sets in very quickly. After a storm, you begin to forget about the impacts. You don't get as concerned about being prepared. Next slide. But with Harvey, just 4 years ago, devastating wind impacts here in the Coastal Bend. We had 40,000 structures damaged, 15,000 destroyed from the communities of Rockport, Port Aransas, inland to Refugio, Goliad, Victoria, and Port Lavaca. Next slide. The impact of the wind, it can be catastrophic to regions, and we felt that across much of this area. Notice the water tower down in Aransas Pass, which took years to restore. And the storm surge and wind impacts combined, devastating for immediate coastal areas like Port Aransas. Next slide. There are typically, though, more than just one hazard with hurricanes, not just the wind, but we have to worry about the water and storm surge. Harvey brought tremendous rains to the upper Texas coast, over 60 inches, a record for the U.S., devastating and flooding thousands of homes, On the right is a picture of Interstate 10 east of Houston that was covered by fresh water from the heavy rains from that storm. Next slide. Hurricane Ike 13 years ago brought devastating storm surge 16 to 20 feet above ground level. That surge washed away 3,000 homes. Just reiterating to us how important it is to be prepared, know if you live in a surge zone, and evacuate if asked to do so. Next slide. So folks, hurricane season starts June 1st. It runs 5 grueling months to the end of November, and it's time to get prepared. So what do we need to do? Next slide. First, we want to make sure your home and business is prepared for the wind. You want to make sure the wind does not get inside your property during the storm. So you want to install thick plywood shutters or professional shutters to every window, every door. Make sure your garage door is protected as well, which is often the weakest link. Next slide. Then we need to prepare for floods. Know your elevation. Check our storm surge maps at our website at weather.gov/Corpus Christi. If you're in a storm surge zone, it's very important to evacuate when asked to do so. Consider flood insurance and never drive into floodwaters. Next slide. Next, make an appointment with your insurance agent. Check the coverages that you have. Discuss what to do after a hurricane, and then photo document everything that you have. Next. Finally, plan your evacuation. Where are you going to go and how are you going to get there? Follow the evacuation orders given by your local officials. Take your supplies with you and prepare to stay at your destination for a week or more. Hurricanes that hit the Texas coast can move inland, impacting the place that we are evacuated to. So when you get there, you want to make sure you hunker down and prepare for the storm. Next slide. So there are a lot of hurricane preparedness tips that are available in our hurricane preparedness guide. So if you have a cell phone on you now, you can take it to the screen and take your camera to that QR code in the bottom left-hand side of the screen and download our Coastal Bend Hurricane Guide. And the tips that are available here can help you prepare in detail for this season. Now I'm going to pass it to Melissa Huffman, our warning coordination meteorologist.
Thanks, John. So if we could go to the next slide within the presentation, John has done a great job of setting us up in terms of thinking about personal preparedness, but as public safety leaders within the Coastal Bend, we also have our communities and our organizations to get ready for the upcoming hurricane season. And a lot of that readiness is getting people to make protective action decisions. And that includes everything from sheltering to maybe changing your operational posture to even evacuating. Anything that gets someone to do different than what they're doing now. And the way that we get people to make these protective action decisions is by having clear and consistent messaging throughout the region. So from the National Weather Service to the city, county, and even state level. So if we go to the next slide, one of the things that's a really big driver in getting people to make these protective action decisions, one of the biggest threats from a hurricane that John mentioned in the first part of this presentation, is storm surge. And so what this map shows you in any area that's colored in red, orange, yellow, blue, or green are areas that are at risk for experiencing storm surge. And so what you're looking at when you see this map is that every coastal county in the Coastal Bend has a vulnerability to storm surge, and it's a hazard I'm going to take a few moments to talk about. If I had broadened this map up, though, you would see that every coastal county in Texas has a vulnerability to it. So this is not just a Coastal Bend problem, but a state of Texas problem as well. If we go to the next slide, I'm going to take a moment to talk about a tool that's available to you as an emergency manager through HurrEvac HVX, which is an online tool. If you're an emergency manager, hopefully this is a tool that's familiar to you. If you've never heard of this before, if you're a new EM, talk to me after this presentation. If you're not an EM, unfortunately, this tool won't be available to you, but know that our decision makers do have some really good information available to them. But you can access this website at hvx.hurrevac.com. If you go to the webpage and log in, you'll see this landing screen. On the left-hand side, you'll see in a red box on your screen there something that says surge. You'll be able to access storm surge information for hypothetical storms. That'll pull up the menu that's on the right-hand side, and you'll be able to see storm surge information for storms of all different categories, as well as different angles of approaches. Now, we call these hypothetical storm surge outputs, moms and meows. I promise I'm not obsessed with cats, but we call meows the maximum envelope of water. We just like to abbreviate it to keep things short. But within this HVX HURAVAC viewer, you're actually able to incorporate some uncertainty into some of the storms. Sometimes when you get information from the National Weather Service, we'll tell you if our confidence is lower on what's actually going to happen with the storm. So you're able to use what we call the meow mixer to be able to get a more complete picture of what the storm surge risk is for your community within a hypothetical storm situation. Now, keep in mind that these meows and moms that are available to this are going to give you maximum storm surge values. So this is really something that you're going to be able to use to make decisions more than 48 hours before landfall. As we get within 48 hours of landfall, you'll have some more specific information that I'll talk about on the next slide. But one of the things that I want to point out is if you're accessing information through HURAVAC using the tools on this screen, you're getting those maximum values, and you'll probably see lower forecast storm surge values closer to landfall. That doesn't mean that your storm surge threat is decreasing. It just means that we're incorporating environmental information for the specific storm of concern for the coastal bend. So if we go to the next slide, this is the storm surge information that's going to be available to you as a decision maker. I have the H hours listed on the screen, so time before anticipated landfall. Before 48 hours before landfall, you're going to have meows, moms, you have all of that information available to you now. Again, this is going to be able to provide you with information for a maximum storm surge threat with anything from angle of approach to category of the storm to forward speed of the storm. That's pretty much within the meows, that yellow box there. Then as we get within 48 hours, you're going to have a few more products available to you, including that potential inundation graphic. That's that image in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. That's going to give you a reasonable worst-case scenario of storm surge for the specific storm of concern. The moms and meows don't incorporate any environmental data, but this potential inundation graphic does. If you look towards the bottom middle of your screen and the bottom right of your screen, we will also have some graphics that you can give to the public to help them understand the storm surge risk in their area. That includes a storm surge watch and warning, which is issued for the potential or danger of life-threatening storm surge inundation. We define that as storm surge of inundation of 3 feet or more. And then you'll also see a peak storm surge forecast graphic. Now, this is going to give you the most likely storm surge with a storm, but this potential inundation graphic on the bottom left, that's going to tell you what you should be preparing for. So again, that's that reasonable worst case scenario. And then you have the most likely on the bottom right. So if we go to the next slide, there's more information available to you just beyond storm surge when it comes to a tropical storm or a hurricane. We've got a menu of those pieces of information, everything from storm timing track and intensity, wind information, rain information, information about tornado threats. We've got a lot of information contained within the National Weather Service. And sometimes when you're reading an email briefing or maybe you're sitting on a webinar, we may not answer a question specific to your community. So ask us. Ask us anything that you need to know to help you with your decision making. Don't be afraid to do that. If we could go to the next slide. We do have some things we want you to keep in mind as you're getting ready for this season. What can be done now to prepare? We do have a series of hurricane town hall talks that are ongoing now that are great, great introductory sessions for understanding hurricane season, but we're also available to schedule any kind of weather preparedness talk for your organization. Another thing that I really want you to think about as a decision maker are what are the questions that you need to ask to get the weather information you need for decisions. So if you have a vulnerability to tropical storm force winds, understanding the timing for the onset of tropical storm force winds is an important piece of information for your organization. So know what you need to make decisions and then be ready to ask those questions. And then finally, get to know the National Weather Service before a storm forms. If this is your first time hearing John or I speak, please, please, please reach out to us after this conference and let's begin building a relationship so that you know who we are before we get into a high stress situation with a tropical storm or a hurricane. So if we go to the next slide, We do have a few opportunities for virtual coordination over the next few weeks. So we've got the hurricane town halls. We are doing Hurricane 101 sessions by request for senior decision makers. So if you're an emergency manager, reach out to us and we'd be happy to schedule that. We're doing general weather and safety presentations. And then we are also hosting a pre-hurricane season open house for emergency managers on May 21st. Invitations for that went out on Monday, and they'll be sent out again over the next few weeks. So if we could go to the next slide. The upcoming hurricane season, John mentioned, begins June 1st. The names for this year's storms are listed in that blue bar on your screen. One of the things that I want to point out, something that's different for this year, is that our tropical weather outlooks are scheduled to begin on May 15th. So that's 2 weeks earlier than in previous years. Our NOAA hurricane season outlook will be released on May 20th. So you'll begin seeing some forecast numbers for what's coming up with this season in the coming weeks. Keep in mind that the seasonal forecast is not a landfall forecast. It's not a guarantee that we'll get a storm. It's a great reminder to prepare for the upcoming season. But when you're thinking about preparing for the upcoming season, prepare for an above normal season in terms of activity. So if we could go to the next slide. I want to leave you with our contact information. This is quite possibly the most important slide that we can give you out of this entire presentation. This is where you can get weather information at our website, our office phone number, which is answered 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, as well as contact information for John and myself. Again, if this is your first time hearing us speak, if you haven't had that face-to-face conversation with us, please reach out, make an introduction so we can begin to get you ready for the upcoming hurricane season. So thank you so much for attending the Coastal Bend Hurricane Conference. And RJ, I will toss it back to you.
Thank you, John Metz and Melissa Huffman. We're very fortunate to have those individuals here with our National Weather Service local Corpus Christi office. Next, just a small admin note here. This whole presentation will be available after this. So if you needed to catch a slide or anything else like that, we'll be able to do that. Our next speaker here in the general session is somebody I'm very happy to introduce. It's Mr. Tony Pena Jr. He is the Assistant Chief for the South Region for the Texas Division of Emergency Management. Tony serves as a Regional Assistant Chief with the Field Response Section of the Texas Division of Emergency Management. He has primary responsibility for DPS Region 3, which consists of 27 deep South Texas counties, the only region affected by natural man-made threats from the Gulf Coast and the border. He maintains his designation as a Master Peace Officer and a graduate of the DPS Command College. He has responded and participated in many disasters, floods, fires, mass casualties, hurricanes, public works, public health, law enforcement, and others during his career. Tony, go ahead and take it away.
Good morning, everyone. On behalf of Governor Abbott, Chief Kidd, and the rest of the state agency leadership, will all send their greetings. Thank you for allowing us to be a part of one of the most successful conferences around, the Coastal Bend Virtual Conference. I'm going to talk about, we were talking about whole community planning, virtual response, and other topics. So my emergency management style is based on my cowboy upbringing, my Marine Corps ingrained behavior, and life in general. As a young cowboy under the tutelage of my grandfather, I learned several things that can be applied to everyday life and emergency management planning and some of the ways we respond to things. First thing he taught me was start your day with prayer. Go to church when you can. Read that ultimate AAR called the Bible. It's got lots of lessons in there. You're only as good as your horse. Listen to them. In our case, well, the National Weather Service, we got to listen to them because they provide us a lot of basic information that we use and depend on every day. Always watch out for your cow dog. Listen to him too, him or her. I mean, they bring a lot of good things and they have really good instincts. Always make sure that your ranch hands, your horse and your dog eat before you do, and always feed them enough to have some left over. That way you get something to eat too. Keep your saddle and your chaps well oiled. It'll keep you from getting chapped. Wear your hat when you're outdoors. Remove it when you greet someone and when indoors, and definitely when you sit down and eat. Always tie good knots or you might find yourself horseless. That definitely applies to the way we have our plans. Make sure you have good plans in place, exercise them, kind of like what we're doing during this event today and into tomorrow. So tie the good knot in the sense that you got a good plan, you've exercised it, and you make sure that it works. Find the weak points. And then always keep a sharp knife in your pocket. Never know when you have to cut the knot. Always have a firm handshake. State your name clearly. Use ma'am and sir when addressing folks. And one more thing that I learned recently is, every morning when you address everyone around you, say, please, sorry, and thank you. At least you got that out of the way early on, and you've said it at least once a day. When you can, take a nap, because you never know when you're going to be able to take another nap. If you walk or drive through a gate and go through it, close it behind you. It was closed for a reason. That applies to a lot of things that we do. Make sure that things that you just don't move things around for moving them around, that there's a rhyme and a reason for it. When closing the gate, never ever leave someone's lock out of the daisy chain. When you leave people out of your plans and your response, not only do they get their feelings hurt, but sometimes you stop them from being able to do what they need to do or what their plan was. Make sure the plans blend. On working cattle and herds, much like a herd, you need to give people direction. They'll figure out how to get there. When you're leading the herd, make sure you look back every now and then. Make sure that they're still following you. Always watch out for that cactus and that long, low-hanging mesquite branch. I equate that one to some of the contractors that show up all of a sudden out of the clear blue sky and say, we're experts in this, we're experts in that. Those are the low-hanging mesquite branches that might come back and haunt you or sting you like cactus. If you need to round them up, make sure there's put an escape route or you might find yourself getting trampled. If you're pushing cattle, make sure that you have enough help to work the flanks, and there's plenty of help available. Every now and then you might have to rope one or more of them. And definitely never ever rope the new mama's calf in her presence unless you and your horse are ready for a fight. One thing I did as a teenager, roping a coyote might seem like a good idea at a time, but what are you going to do with him now? They get pretty angry once you got a rope around their neck. There's always a time and a place for joking around. A dead, headless rattlesnake on the driver's side floorboard of your granddaddy's truck is not a joke and makes for a long walk back to the main gate. Always take care of those that can't take care of themselves. Seek out your elders, listen to their stories. They are full of wisdom and great advice about what to do, but most importantly about what not to do. There's a lot of emergency managers on this call, a lot of National Weather Service people, a lot of people that have been around, done a lot of things that have helped a lot of folks over the years, and there's a lot of experience. Those of you that are new to the business, tap into those people. They always have good information. When you need help, reach out to your neighbors as soon as you realize it. It's amazing how willing they will be available. They will readily make themselves available to come to you and help you with your crisis. Always keep your gas tank full. And always remember to put the jack back in its place the last time you change the tire. This includes the tire tools. You got to have all the tools in place. Much like my grandfather and other cowboy sayings and advice, the Marine Corps prides itself in its leadership. And yes, I'm a Marine. There are 14 leadership traits that are ingrained into the Marine Corps culture. However, they can all be summed up into the following statement. It is our job as leaders to provide, nurture, and take care of the needs of every Marine that is at the front line by providing them with the support they need, to make sure that they have what they need, that they have enough hydration, substance, and other things. By the way, sleep is overrated, especially during an event. We've all experienced that. Our jobs as leaders or servant leaders is to ensure that everyone associated with the response is cared for and has the tools they need to stay in the fight, whether it's shovels, fire nozzles, bullets, traffic cones, or syringes. Our success is their success. Their success is our success. Their failure is our failure. And most of us in this business don't do failure very well. We now find ourselves in the fight for our lives and those around us. COVID has affected all of us. Everyone knows someone that has been affected, including ourselves. We think differently, act differently. Our mannerisms and behaviors are all changed. We think of others and how they might affect us or how we might affect them. It began with awareness, then testing, now vaccines in an attempt to save our human race. During the last year or so, many of our lives were lost, including some fellow emergency managers and many first responders. So a few weeks ago, many of us are longing for a change in pace from the COVID response. We spoke of wishing for a disaster. Of course, God did what he normally does when we wish for things. He spread some of that chaos dust on us and said, here you go. That dust that he sprinkled was sure cold and lasted for a week or so. It caused chaos in our power grids, along with all the side effects of water plants going down and infrastructure failing. No, that was not the kind of relief we wanted from COVID, but that's what we got. But you know what? All of us took the bull by the horns. We all worked hard to get what we needed for our residents. We turned inward and to our immediate neighbors for help. Everyone pitched in. We worked through the problems and solved them as Texans do. As in any disaster, we learn lessons, some good and some about what not to do. I learned that the power inverter in my truck is very effective at making coffee at 0500. But I also learned that the sum of the formula, quote, ice over concrete plus Crocs plus 0500 equals a state emergency manager on his side. Something we all got to think about. We learned about the new reporting tool TDM introduced and called iStat and PStat, where you can go report damages early on that allows an upload pictures of those damages. And it even marks the reporting address with a lat long. We also have more tools coming our way. Technology is important. We have one that's coming that will help us measure and estimate the amount of debris that's generated as a result of a storm or other natural event. Technology and necessity have created some wonderful tools, but we as emergency managers and those associated with emergency management need to learn how to utilize them and how to instruct our residents on how to use them. All of us learned in the last year and a half or so how to effectively work remotely, and some became masters of Teams and Zooms and many other forms of online interactive ways of interacting and cooperating. We learned to use social media to get information out and how effective it can be. We also learned how effective it can hurt us, how it can hurt us effectively by starting rumors that are hard to chase down and hard to put out. So we find ourselves in the eve of hurricane season. And as it draws closer, we reminisce of old time and what we are good at doing. But wait, COVID taught us valuable lessons. Social distancing, social gatherings, infections, etc. What are we doing to incorporate that into what we have coming? Congregate and non-congregate shelter and evacuations. What are our local plans? Evacuations pose their problems, and we no longer have as many communities ready to receive evacuees as we had in the past. Should we consider local sheltering operations away from immediate flood zones? Infrastructure and damaged infrastructure, the cold spell served as a reminder of what happens. Have we taken steps as individual communities to remedy that? Generators for our homes, for businesses, especially critical businesses, nursing homes, dialysis centers, etc. How about minimally installing or requiring some of these businesses to have at least the switches and connections to plug in those generators? Are we reinforcing food and water for at least 10 days, or are we still delivering the message of 3 days worth? How about cash on hand, fuel in our vehicles, etc.? I believe it is time to remind our residents to get back to the basics. Practicing personal responsibility. It's something we need to learn and practice daily. It's a message we need to deliver to our residents. Government at any level, local, county, or state, or federal, should never be plan A, B, or C. It should be the last resort to help us help our residents. I'll leave you with something my grandmother taught me as well. Wash your hands several times a day. Take a nap when you can, and always be thankful at the end of the day when you lay your head down. May all of us continue to be blessed with much success in our responses. God is good. All is well in Region 3. Thank you, and God bless Texas and this conference. Thank you, RJ. Thank you, Danielle, and everyone else that's on this conference for attending.
Thank you very much, Chief Pena. We appreciate your words there. And I look forward to working with you further and more often. We'll now be moving into the first panel presentation led by Ron Retzlaff, Emergency Manager of Naval Air Station Corpus Christi. Ron, are you there?
Yes, I am, RJ. Good morning, everyone, and thank you, RJ. I appreciate the opportunity to join you this morning and lead this discussion. Whole community is defined by FEMA as a means by which residents, emergency management practitioners, organizational and community leaders, and government officials can collectively understand and assess the needs of their respective communities and determine the best ways to organize and strengthen their assets, capacities, and interests. Using a strategic whole community approach leverages the knowledge and experiences of all individuals in a community when preparing for protecting against, responding to, and recovering from emergencies. Joining us today are 4 subject matter experts working on the front lines to address whole community related lessons learned and best practices. Crystal Lyons is a disability consultant specializing in ADA Title II, accessible public transportation, and inclusive emergency preparedness. She is a member of the Coastal Bend Functional Needs Support Team, dedicated to making emergency planning and preparedness inclusive of needs of people with disabilities since Hurricane Rita. She also serves on the Texas Emergency Management Advisory Committee, Executive Committee. Hillary Watt is the CEO, CFO for the Coastal Bend Regional Advisory Council, commonly known as CBREC. She has been with the organization since 2009 and serves as a member of the Texas Emergency Medical Task Force Executive Committee. CBREC is a nonprofit funded by the Texas Department of State Health Services and the Federal National hospital preparedness program that CBRAC manages for Public Health Region 11. Hillary is passionate about healthcare preparedness and is always eager to engage as many healthcare stakeholders as possible into the Coastal Bend Healthcare Preparedness Coalition. Margarito Gonzalez has served as Safety and Security Manager for the Texas State Aquarium for the past 4 years. Responsibilities of his position include scheduling and documenting drills, assisting with hurricane plan updates, and serving as incident commander in select operations. Margarito is a U.S. Army veteran and has been certified as a Texas Peace Officer for over 20 years, 14 of those active with the Bishop Police Department and Nueces County Constable Precinct 3 and the Kingsville Police Departments. Dr. Jim Lee is a professor of economics at Texas A&M University, Corpus Christi. He's also director of the university's South Texas Economic Development Center. Since Harvey hit the Coastal Bend in 2017, the center has been focusing on storm recovery and economic resilience. Before we turn this over to our first presenter, we want to remind you of the chat feature. Each of you can submit questions throughout the presentation, and these questions will be shared in a post-conference frequently asked questions or FAQ document. All right, Crystal, you're up first, and welcome.
Good morning, everybody. As a quick reminder, I'd like to let everyone know that whole community planning includes people with access and functional needs. That's an area that was once referred to as special needs, and it was too difficult for many people to get to special needs or even figure out what special needs meant. So several years ago, access and functional needs became a popular phrase that seems to be working better and gives people something to think about. So we have individuals who need assistance due to any condition, temporary or permanent, that limits their ability to act. These individuals may have physical, developmental, or intellectual disabilities, chronic conditions, limited English proficiency, or maybe older adults. Any of these individuals may function fine in their typical structured environment, but not so well during a disaster, a very stressful situation, such as an evacuation. So my question to you is, what if you could find a way to engage and educate people with access and functional needs to help build community resilience? This could also be something you do in your own company as well, not just in a community. Help build resilience so that individuals and families bounce back better after a disaster. So the Coastal Bend has two models to share with you. First is the functional needs support team. We locally call it the FNST. There are a lot of us and a big name, so always acronyms, right? So for over 15 years, this cross-disability team of dedicated individuals has worked together to create awareness of issues related to people with disabilities or people with access and functional needs. The team provides input on evacuation and communication through drills and tabletop exercises. And perhaps most importantly, the FNST provides training for first responders throughout the region. They've created a soon-to-be updated tips for first responders guide to go along with the training. What better way to educate first responders and volunteers than from the experts? Individuals with disabilities present best practices to interact with and communicate with individuals who are deaf and hard of hearing, have low vision or are blind, have physical limitations, have cognitive or developmental disabilities, or older adults that would never admit to having any personal limitations. During the 2020 hurricane planning season, the FNST provided input on effective communication, social distancing, and COVID-related issues to the city's Office of Emergency Management. So these first two slides will give you an idea of the places that you can find experts to bring together to help inform your agency, your local government entity, your company. Everyone's input is needed and everyone's input is valued. I'll just read through the list quickly that were on the 2 slides, just so you have an idea. The City of Corpus Christi Office of Emergency Management, the Coastal Bend Center for Independent Living, 211 United Way Helpline, Nueces Center for Mental Health and Intellectual Disabilities, the Deaf and Hard of Hearing Center, and the next slide, the Lighthouse for the Blind, Texas A&M Corpus Christi Disability Services, Area Agency on Aging and the Aging and Disability Resource Center, Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid, along with a certified public transportation travel trainer and individuals with experience in community hospice care, children's medical service, and disability consulting. So you see that several areas besides just disability are included in this group. This is a group of volunteers that work voluntarily together and have done so for almost everybody on these lists for the last 15 years in our community. So your community may not have all these types of organizations, but you do have your go-to organizations that address the real needs of your community, and I urge you to seek them out. Some of you may lead some of these organizations, so I also encourage you to find your way to the table. So next slide. Another Coastal Bend resource is the ongoing preparedness training for individuals with disabilities, older adults, and caregivers. With the goal of building personal and family resilience, the Coastal Bend Center for Independent Living provides training that helps people with access and functional needs go beyond the checklist and prepare for their unique needs. This training also includes training for caregivers and support staff. We found it very important to have caregivers personally prepared so that they're able to assist others. And if they're prepared, they'll also know what important questions to ask when helping people prepare for all hazards. So the recent ice storm was a great reminder to plan for all hazards. Some of the preparedness training participants recently shared that they fell into one or two camps. Either they were happy they had supplies and didn't need to rush out to buy anything. They were comfortable at home if they had heat, and or they learned that they were totally unprepared because their preparedness was not robust enough. So why? Some people said that dealing with COVID-related shortages led to extra supplies, including food and water, while others admitted that COVID-related fatigue led them to let their guard down and not stay on top of their supplies. So we know we have work to do. Over time that we found these to be the best practices for building resilience. This is a short list, and it's the list that keeps coming up over and over. So preparedness of caregivers, as I mentioned earlier, support staff, go back please, support staff, of family, caregiver support staff and family members is critical for people with access and functional needs, because you can help plan for the unique needs of those individuals. Go bags and stay boxes need to be thoughtfully filled and updated regularly. Going beyond the checklist, consider unique needs. Again, that's just very important, the unique needs, and involved individuals and family members in that planning. Written plans are necessary, and be sure to plan during these blue sky times. We have a few more weeks of blue sky. Vital document binders or virtual binders can save unnecessary problems post-disaster. We found that over and over. And planning for pets is another essential element to planning. If an evacuation is necessary, we don't want people to stay home because they didn't have a plan for their pets, and that does happen all too often. So next slide. Just a few lessons learned. Preparedness must be ongoing. All hazards must be considered. We've really learned that in the last year. Be prepared for no notice events. This is really important to emphasize on the coast because we're often too focused on hurricanes, which is good, but we need to focus on all hazards. It's easier to prepare for a hurricane because typically you have a couple days notice and you have time to get things done, but we need to get out of that little comfort zone. And small things make a difference. The written plan that we highly emphasize, it can help reduce stress when disaster strikes. I know that for a fact. I mean, when I can go to mine as a storm is approaching, or when I went to it during the freeze, it was nice to have everything written down, things that I might not have thought of. Items that help maintain independence in unfamiliar settings are crucial items for your kits, and that's why you have to be very thoughtful and think of unique needs. Independence is paramount. Comfort food and comfort items can work wonders, and for people of all ages, from children to adults, trust me. Plan and prepare for pets and service animals. We do a lot of emphasis on this, and checklists and things so that you will actually be prepared. And I know there are resources like the USDA for preparing for livestock, which is important as well. We don't want to be staying, especially like Melissa mentioned with the storm surges. We want to have a plan and get out of harm's way when told or suggested to do so. And use the knowledge from recovery efforts to strengthen resilience, and that goes along with those vital documents. You know, what if you had certain papers with you during recovery? How could that have gone faster? And we've had people share all this. That's where the Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid has been very helpful in helping us get the message out to people of things that they might need in a recovery. And finally, tap into the knowledge of your FNST or whatever team that you put together for all hazards. So not just the most, on the coast, not just for hurricane, from wildfires to ice storms to COVID testing and vaccine distribution, we found that don't try to make decisions for the whole community in a vacuum. Make sure that you include the FNST or whatever your team is for everything. I think you'll be glad you did. So for more information on the Coastal Bend FNST, you can contact Billy Delgado with the Corpus Christi Emergency Management. He's the coordinator, or Judy Telge with the Coastal Bend Center for Independent Living. So to help build family and community resilience, gather your go-to community organizations. It's likely that they already work together with each other informally. Engage them in planning for people with access and functional needs. Learn from each other. Educate your community on building personal and community resilience. Stay connected and continue to share knowledge. And remember, people with access and functional needs are part of the whole community and not just in disaster situations. So next we'll hear from Hillary. Thank you.
Thank you, Crystal. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me. And I want to congratulate the Planning Committee on 10 years of this event. It's a huge accomplishment, and thank you to everybody involved. I wanted to start out by mentioning the mission statement of CBRAC. The mission statement is to reduce death and disability related to trauma, disaster, and acute illness through implementation of appropriate education and a well-planned, coordinated disaster and emergency response system. CBRAC are a 501c3 nonprofit. We are one of 22 RACs in the state of Texas, and we are one of 8 of those RACs who are the lead RACs who are federally funded to implement and administer and manage the federal hospital preparedness program. And we lead these 8 areas also for the Texas Emergency Medical Task Force. That's more of the response arm side of the CBRAC, and you'll hear more on the Emergency Medical Task Force from John Phillips later in the presentation. On our state funding, we're funded for the 12 counties in the Coastal Bend, and we provide oversight and administration for the regional system of care. We are basically the glue and the air traffic controller who bring all of the stakeholders together to write regional plans for our EMS and hospital folks to make sure that people who are injured or acutely ill get to the right place at the right time to the most appropriate level of care for their chief complaint or injury. That's on blue sky days. After 9/11, the federal government implemented what they called the Hospital Preparedness Program. And this was to help increase capability for healthcare organizations. It is a cooperative agreement between the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness that establishes a foundation for national healthcare preparedness. And as the only source of federal funding for healthcare system preparedness and response, Hospital Preparedness, or HPP, promotes a consistent national focus to improve patient outcomes during emergencies and disasters and enables rapid recovery. CBRAC and the HPP program fall under the FEMA Emergency Service Function 8. And for those of you who know the ESF's Function 8 is Public Health and Medical, and CBRAC fall under the medical portion of there. And we have 4 main capabilities that we work towards. Foundation for Healthcare and Medical Readiness, Healthcare and Medical Response Coordination, Continuity of Healthcare Service Delivery, and Medical Surge, which due to COVID, we're all very good at now. So in 2014, the guidance we received from the HPP program asked us to develop what we call healthcare coalitions. Healthcare coalitions are the stakeholders that we convene, and they include not only trauma hospitals, long-term care facilities, nursing homes, dialysis, home health agencies, behavioral health agencies, home hospice, emergency managers, and our partners at Public Health. And the healthcare coalitions get together and we cooperate and collaborate on identifying our hazards and risks locally, as well as any kind of man-made, natural, biological, or terroristic threats that we could possibly face. And we take an all hazards approach to planning and preparing for any all hazards event or emergency event that we could encounter. This is accomplished through convening all of these stakeholders. We have meetings, we do planning, exercises and trainings, and of course, real world events. We like to engage the leadership of the agencies and stakeholders that we work with, and also the individuals who work in the emergency operations centers during disasters, the people who are going to be able to provide us with information that we can then share back to the state and the local level. We like to connect all of the stakeholders with their local EMCs, make sure that the flow of information and any requests for unmet needs flow through the proper chain of command, and we can meet those unmet needs through resource requests. We engage in a lot of information sharing and gathering. So there's a list server that we utilize. We provide training to our stakeholders on WebEOC and EM Resource. Those are tools that are used, web-based tools that are utilized for information sharing real world, real time. If you want more information on the Healthcare Coalition and you're not already engaged in that, you can go to cbrac.org and get more information from there. We'll be happy to reach out to you if you reach out to us and get you involved with the Healthcare Coalition. At the end of the day, what we really focus on are relationships. And as Chief Kidd always says, don't get to know the people that you need to work with on the day of the disaster. Have a relationship established with those folks. I can't say enough about the importance of having relationships with the leadership and the boots on the ground and the folks that you're going to have to communicate with during a disaster. And I believe that's all I have for now. And thank you for your time. And I will turn it over to our next speaker, who is Margarito Gonzalez, Safety and Security Manager for Texas State Aquarium. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to present today's hurricane conference. As RJ mentioned, I believe next year's is planned to be live again, and so hopefully we'll be seeing everybody face to face starting next year. Let me take a minute to tell you a little bit about the Texas State Aquarium. We are a 501c3 not-for-profit association. We opened up in 1990. Our mission is to engage people with animals, inspire appreciation for our seas, and support wildlife conservation. We focus on species from the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean Sea, and we average about 550,000 guests per year, so we stay pretty busy throughout the year. Our Wildlife Rescue Center rehabilitates and whenever possible returns animals to their natural environment. In the past 3 years alone, they've rescued, rehabilitated, and released more than 2,500 sea turtles. As a matter of fact, from February 13th through February 23rd of this year, we admitted, cared for over 1,000 cold stunned sea turtles and have released over 950 of them back to their natural habitat. So this year we talked about multiple storm challenges. All this was done dealing with the cold stunned turtles. All this was done while we're still dealing with COVID, as everybody else is. And after dealing with a week-long winter storm that affected us all. We're in South Texas. We don't expect that kind of weather, but we were shut down, I believe, for 4 days. And I believe that the only way that the aquarium is able to manage these events is by keeping our employees well prepared and ready for any type of emergency. And also, I've heard it a couple of times already this morning, by continuing our relationships with our local, state, and federal resources. We keep them close to us. And depending on the event, we may be calling on these resources or they may be calling on us, but the open communications and continued collaboration is key to the aquarium success when dealing with these types of events. So we consider ourselves a smaller organization, and this is why hopefully my message today targets those smaller businesses and organizations that might need a little bit of a push or some ideas on how to get prepared throughout the year, not only for hurricanes, but for other catastrophic events or major events. We want to share what we do to keep our employees prepared and ready for any type of emergency. Next slide, please. So the aquarium is accredited through the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, and they mandate 6 live action drills per year. These include first aid and dive emergencies, animal escape scenarios, and severe weather drills. To maintain our employee readiness, we've doubled up on these drills, and we actually schedule 1 per month throughout the whole year. In addition to these, we also conduct tabletop exercises at least quarterly. These include hurricane preparedness, cold stunned turtles, stranded dolphins, and oiled animal events. So our employees may be notified of what drill is scheduled for that month, but they are never given exact dates or actual scenarios. And actually that changed post-COVID. Pre-COVID, it was all a surprise. They didn't even know what type of exercise or drill was happening that month. And we believe that this keeps them in the ready and tests the actual response when the drill actually happens. After every scenario, we conduct after-action reviews. All participants are given the opportunity to provide input and corrective action is taken. So we discuss everything from the scenario, reaction, and responsiveness. And so this And so this drills are always formally documented and shared with the whole organization. That's something that we input into our intranet, and that way they can utilize those drills as a resource for future scenarios. Also, our hurricane preparedness exercise is usually scheduled in April. This gives us the opportunity to talk through our hurricane plan and make any updates necessary. This may include any additional animals, equipment, facilities, or even vehicles that have changed throughout the year. And during our hurricane audit, if you would, we don't just look at hurricane scenarios. We don't just look at floodings or anything like that. We also look at cold stunning events. We also look at winter storms, and we utilize what we've learned from those to update our hurricane plan. So it's not just about hurricanes themselves. For our hurricane plan, we have a ride-out team and recovery teams, and they're identified and added to our plan each year. So each department head reviews these teams and the respective employees with the respective employees and determine who will be assigned to each team for the current hurricane season. Our ride-out team are the ones that stay in the aquarium in case of a hurricane or other catastrophic event, and they continue the daily care of animal collection and secure the facility. The recovery team obviously are the ones that come after the fact and provide relief for those that have hunkered down during the event. Part of our preparedness includes contacting all our local resources. Again, I've heard it mentioned a couple of times this morning already. I've mentioned it once as well. These are very important to us. Matter of fact, some of our resources are out there participating in this event. We incorporate this into our written plans. Doing this, again, is extremely important for organizations our size. And I encourage everybody to create these relationships and keep them in mind during these incidents. Several of our departments have specific responsibilities for certain catastrophic event preparedness. One example of this is our marine mammal department. They practice assembling dolphin carriers that are used to move our dolphins if necessary. So the crates are very heavy, and it takes additional staff and equipment to assemble, but through preparedness and drills, our marine mammal department has become efficient in the assembly of this important piece of equipment. They conduct not only tabletop exercises, but live action drills as well. And that includes the care, assembly, and the breakdown of the equipment. Next slide, please. We also have incorporated a scaled down incident command system into our operations. I've worked for other organizations that are even nervous about talking incident command. But I believe that ICS is only, and they believe that ICS is for only large organizations, the large events or operations. But remember that it is scalable. And what we've done is we've scaled it down to meet our needs at the aquarium. We've got an incident commander, an ops officer, a safety officer, a PIO, and also a liaison and an admin. And they've got specific duties for each of their offices. But remember, scale it down and make it work for your organizational needs. So under our operations officer, we have got work groups depending on the event. We keep span of control in mind for when we assign these groups. And we kept our organizational chart quite simple. Instead of trying to decide whether we need a strike team or a task force, we simply call them working groups. And this has worked out for the aquarium. Our liaison is responsible for coordinating resources between aquarium departments. Our admin is responsible for note taking and all of our records keeping. So again, these are two examples of how our organizational chart is probably different than what you normally see on a standard ICS chart, but we've made it work for us. We use ICS forms 202, form 214, and the job safety analysis forms for safety. We have also defined specific events that will initiate our incident command, a hurricane, a winter storm, or a dangerous animal escape, or anything that will require 2 or more departments involved within our organization will activate our incident command. Just as we do with our drill forms, we also share our ICS forms with all our organization. We share those on intranet so that they have access to those. And again, they can use them as a resource for future operations. We use the system for anything from a hurricane to a winter storm, or even catching a shark in one of our exhibits. It has been proven very successful in our operations. These are things that larger organizations are probably already doing. Again, our message is for smaller places that may need ideas on how to prepare for emergencies. Remember to keep your employees engaged with drills and share the documentation with them. This provides them with a resource for future drills and operations. Get them involved in deciding what drills or scenarios they think are important for their particular departments. If there is a need to assign a ride-out team and a recovery team for your plans, make sure your employees know exactly where they fall in that plan, and so that they can be ready to respond appropriately when you activate your hurricane plan. Again, we go back to our resources. Any local resources that you currently have or you feel you need, please start those communications early on. Incorporate them into your organization's plans also. I can't stress enough how important these are for smaller organizations such as ours. So again, if we at the aquarium may ever be a resource to you or your organization, please do not hesitate to call on us. And I hope this information is helpful. I've participated in these hurricane conferences in the past, and I've always taken something new. We should always be learning. Thanks again for the opportunity to be able to speak to you today.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jim Lee, and I'm an economist, so I relied on numbers and data to tell a story. Today, I present to you what hard data tell us about how well our local communities can respond to a hurricane and bounce back from it. It's a so-called BRIC index, an acronym for baseline, reliance, indicators for communities, developed by the University of South Carolina. Those 6 broad areas covers almost every aspect of a community that can affect its response to a disaster, from socioeconomic factors and housing infrastructure to environmental factors like storm frequency. A 5 for the overall index is the highest. So as you can see on the slide, most indexes are relatively low for our counties in the coastal bend, especially these rural areas like B and Kennedy counties. FEMA funded the project. After Harvey, FEMA used those data to determine the capacity to recover among our impacted communities. And Aransas County was supposed to have the least capacity to bounce back because it's the smallest community in a Harvey disaster zone with 41 impacted counties in Texas. But what does history tell us about Rockport's recovery? More than 3 years of observations, I can say Rockport's experience is a best practice in the history of natural disasters, especially hurricanes. More than 85% local businesses reopened within 1 year, and the economy bounced back in less than 2 years. This speed of recovery was unprecedented. In another study, I found Rockport recovered at a much faster speed than Key West, recovering from Irma, which hit Florida a week after Harvey hit Texas. So what made Rockport a miracle in the disaster and especially hurricane history? I look at all 90 counties hit by hurricanes Harvey and Irma in 2017, and I found the socio-economic and community capital indexes help explain how fast those communities actually recovered in the first 2 years. And FEMA has started highlighting community and social capital when they talk about disaster recovery. So what is it? It's about how residents network with each other and how they communicate with each other. I remember then Rockport Mayor CJ Wack sent out an email update every day in the first 3 months after Harvey made landfall in 2017. At the end of his message, he always said, it's going to be better every day. With the leadership of the Rockport Fulton Chamber of Commerce, Rockport actually had the most applications for federal and state grants for reconstruction projects and small business grants from the Rebuild Texas Fund. So my bottom line is that forget all those data that you see about our inherent resilience capacity. Not that planning is not that important, but our experience post-Harvey highlights the importance of civic leadership and communications that hold us all together after this disaster. Thank you for listening. Back to you, Ron.
Hey, sorry about that. Technical difficulties on the first panel. Thanks to each of our panelists for sharing their insights and being with us today. Remember that we intend to address questions that have been submitted in the chat in a published recap document after the conference. We're running a bit behind, so we're going to go ahead and take a short break, and we'll return at the top of the hour. During the break, please enjoy these short videos from our generous sponsors, HEB and the Port of Corpus Christi Authority. Please cue the videos.
HEB is helping seniors during the coronavirus outbreak. In partnership with Favor Delivery, it gives seniors access to their very own personal shopper by phone.
Oh, HEB delivered! Thank you, HEB!
And as if showing up each day to rise to the challenge wasn't enough, somehow find the strength to do it all with a little extra joy in their hearts.
We're not stopping now.
Millions have been left without power, water, and food. And they say everything's bigger in Texas, and it is. Even the checks. HEB is donating $1 million to support food banks throughout the Lone Star State. Look at this. Unbelievable. HEB. Thank you so much.
What we have going on today is we have a distribution of hand sanitizer. This has been graciously donated by HEB. The distilleries in the state of Texas and across the country, they've been allowed to repurpose their operations to create this hand sanitizer, but it's in bulk. And so what we've done at the port is take it from bulk in 55-gallon drums and bring it down to a size that can be distributed to our first responder groups.
We have a lot of responders out there with firsthand contact with the public, and a lot of people who are either carrying the virus or suspected of carrying the virus. Law enforcement, the fire service, and the EMS need a way to obtain hand sanitizer. When you go to the store, there just isn't any to purchase right now.
I'm getting it for the city of Fremont, the city of Orange Grove, city of Atlas, and Jimos County.
To be able to bring this here and to provide that to them, it's been really great for them. It's just one less thing they have to worry about.
That increases morale, it increases how well the people work together in the future. It increases the amount of trust that people have in between each other.
I think we'll be a healthier community because of it, and hopefully a stronger community as we've all had to work together to get over this.
and review your local annexes. Our focus today will be taking a glimpse into some of the best practices and lessons learned from this past year. Attendees can submit questions throughout the presentation. However, there will be no questions between panelists. If time permits, a Q&A will be held at the end of the presentations. Questions not addressed will be sent out as a fact sheet post-program. Joining us today are 4 subject matter experts working on the front lines to address mass care and shelter-related concerns. First up will be Thomas Randall. Spent his career in law enforcement, serving as the Brazos and Burleson County Sheriff's Office for 37 years. After spending 2 years with the Texas Department of Public Safety, working on the Public Safety Broadband Program, Lieutenant Randall joined the First Responder Network Authority as the Senior Public Safety Advisor for Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, and Arkansas. He is responsible for advocating stakeholder interests in FirstNet. Also joining us will be John Phillips. He serves as the Chief Operating Officer for the Coastal Bend Regional Advisory Council and the Regional Coordinator for the Texas Emergency Medical Task Force, EMTF 11. Beginning his career as a non-medical ambulance driver, Mr. Phillips' public safety career included Third Service EMS, Fire-Based EMS, and municipal fire departments. Prior to EMTF, Mr. Phillips served as a fire chief of the city of Morgan's Point Resort. During his tenure as fire chief, he implemented an aggressive training program and focused on core skills and officer development. Also joining us, Lieutenant Commander Keith Pankow. He is currently the 8th Coast Guard District Response Advisory Team Supervisor. He has over 20 years of Navy and Coast Guard experience in crisis and emergency management, responding to several different types of natural and man-made disasters. He has a Master of Arts in Organization Leadership from Gonzaga University and a Master of Science in Environmental Sciences from Louisiana State University. Also joining us will be Patrick Knapp. He is a regional disaster officer in Texas who works with individuals, families, and communities to help them minimize the effects of disasters along the U.S. Gulf Coast. Patrick managed the largest shelter in U.S. history during Hurricane Katrina at the Reliant Park Astrodome. He is also a trained emergency manager and a certified as a lead implementer for business continuity management systems. He has received the Tiffany and Spirit of Excellence Awards for Management and the Spirit of Excellence Award for Technical Services from the American Red Cross. Up first, thank you, sir, and Mr. Thomas Randall. You may begin.
Thanks, Gary. Public safety stressed to us early on at the FirstNet Federal Authority the value of having a fleet of dedicated deployable assets that can help with connectivity and with coverage and with capacity when these major events damage our critical infrastructure and limit our first responders' communication capabilities. That is why this was a core requirement that was built into our contract with AT&T to provide first responders with on-demand access to the network during response and recovery efforts when everything else goes down. We all need to be prepared to take the right steps and to have the right assets in place to keep public safety agencies connected to the information that they need to be able to make those rescues, to communicate and coordinate their storm response and to aid in recovery. Now, before Hurricane Michael made landfall, about 30 million people were under a hurricane or tropical storm watch or warning across 6 states. It was important to our preparations that we stage nearly half of our deployable assets near that impact area to be ready for that quick on-scene setup once the winds die down. Now, Michael made landfall near Mexico Beach, Florida as a Category 4 storm with sustained winds of 155 miles an hour, one of the strongest storms that ever hit the continental U.S. In the Florida Panhandle, it really caused major power outages and heavy damage to the public safety communications infrastructure. So to provide service in the aftermath of that storm, the FirstNet Response Operation Group guided the deployment of the dedicated FirstNet asset fleet based on the consultation and needs of public safety and in alignment with Homeland Security's National Incident Management System and also FEMA's National Response Framework that focuses our response on life safety, on incident stabilization, and on property conservation. Those FirstNet dedicated SATCOLs were used to provide connectivity for first responders in those hard-hit areas like Panama City and Tallahassee, Florida, and then in Seminole County and Colquitt, Georgia, and more areas like that. These deployments supported the local first responders, but as well as the police and fire and rescue teams that came in to assist from as far away as Oregon. We spoke to some of our Texas first responders who said that they usually would see lines of power company trucks heading in first, but this time it was those deployable assets that they were seeing. And some of these assets even remained deployed for about 6 months to assist in recovery efforts. Now, working with the state of Florida, we were able to identify public safety agencies that were without communications or commercial cellular service and delivered hundreds of FirstNet-enabled devices to be able to connect to our deployable assets, which really helped those first responders carry out their important mission of keeping the public safe. But by limiting the access of on the deployables to those FirstNet Band 14 devices, the public safety spectrum was really completely dedicated to first responders working the incident, and they did not really have to compete with the general public or the media for that bandwidth. Next slide, please. Looking at North Carolina, it was hit hard by Hurricane Florence, and it was a slow-moving Cat 1 that brought historic flooding to the area. The flooding caused the city of Whitehall's power and LMR system to go down and left them without voice communications right in the middle of their recovery efforts. Being able to bring in a FirstNet deployable to establish LTE connectivity and then using their enhanced push-to-talk functionality over those Band 14 devices allowed the city to maintain voice communications without interruption. And the EPTT actually became the primary means of communications while their LMR network remained down. The city also utilized the coverage and capacity of the deployables for their data connectivity and also for their MDCs, which provided them with that resiliency in their affected areas. The FirstNet dedicated assets, such as the satellite cell on light trucks, well, these are mobile cell sites that link to the FirstNet via satellite and do not have to rely on the availability of commercial power. They provide first responders with similar capabilities and connectivity as a cell tower. These fleet of deployables are LTE Band 14 enabled and provide voice, including voice over VoLTE, data, location messaging, alerting, whitelisting, priority and preemption services. And each one of these FirstNet deployables is designed to be capable of up to 25 megs downlink and 8 megs uplink. For Florence, we had started staging network assets from across the nation to the Carolinas for that quick deployment following the storm's initial impact. And all of these included the dozens of cell on wheels and satellite cell on light trucks, the emergency communications vehicles, multiple charging stations, and also a command center. Now, Whitehall always intended to maintain their LMR network in the future, but this really shows that how having those tools to augment your system and have those redundancies in place will really save you when something goes down. We always know that something's going to go down. Next slide, please. Then take a look at our pandemic year plus, which included the wildfires in the west, the tornadoes in the east, and then the hurricane season that targeted Louisiana. The back-to-back storms took out all kinds of communications infrastructure, and it decimated power and left the state trying to maintain critical communications throughout each one of these storm strikes. This was actually our first field deployment of FirstNet 1 in a real incident, and you'll see FirstNet 1 in that upper left-hand corner. We were able to use the aerostat as an LTE tower in the sky. Its purpose is to provide a larger coverage footprint when, like in Louisiana, there were a number of macro cell sites that went down, and we knew that they were going to be out of service for more than 2 weeks. So instead of deploying multiple SATCOLTs into an area, we were able to use those particular assets a little bit more surgically and take them out to the other locations and then use the aerostat to cover the big swaths of area of coverage where there were a lot of sites down. Now, the aerostat is not really designed to be a part of the first wave of deployable solution. That's really for our SATCOLTs to do, but it's really for that long-term solution for that larger identified outage area. And being able to have FirstNet 1 in the air meant we could extend coverage to a wider area for public safety. And that was a game changer for those who were performing response recovery following what ended up being a large-scale multi-storm catastrophic event. Now, FirstNet 1 carries a 40-watt LTE base station as high as 1,500 feet above the ground, and it's designed to provide LTE coverage to more than 100 square miles for weeks at a time, since the tether that connects it to an ongoing source of power. And AT&T mobile communications vehicle is on the ground, and it provides the power and the backhaul connections, typically via satellite, although we could use fiber if that's available. Now, we had a waiver from the FCC that would allow FirstNet 1 to fly as high as the 1,500-foot capability, but most of the post-Hurricane Laura mission was flown at 750 feet and sometimes at a high level of about 1,000 feet. Now, we have to take into consideration that winds are an issue with the aerostat and also with the sat colts. And it took a couple of days before the wind conditions allowed for the inflation of the blimp and then for its deployment. And then you look at the sat colt dish as a big sail. So we got to be mindful of that as the next storm fronts approached. These were really not the only form factors of deployables that were used during Laura. There were also mobile routers, in-building boosters, and rapid deployment kits. And these are all-in-one portable communication solutions. They're designed to provide first responders with reliable access and that connectivity. And they're housed in a rugged carrying case, and it contains 4 smartphones, a wireless router, a battery, and a monitoring system to maintain the power in emergency situations. Its cellular, GPS, and Wi-Fi antennas, well, they create a 300-foot connectivity bubble, which really helps to establish that initial communications wherever the RDK is deployed. Well, as with every hurricane season, the need to be prepared is critically important. And communications and connectivity is vital before, during, and after any event. Planning, preparing, and pre-staging of assets to support the response efforts is how we will help get help to people who really need the help the most. In 2020, we had more than 750 requests for deployable assets from public safety, covering everything from COVID testing sites to power outages to fiber cuts to hurricanes and wildfires. As part of our roadmap strategy and based on the feedback that we received from public safety, we've recently invested in expanding that deployable fleet to include additional dedicated portable cell sites, command vehicles, and also smaller form factor deployables. We will continue to work with our stakeholders in public safety as we offer additional solutions and enhancements to the network. And I really look forward to speaking to you all further about the benefits of the FirstNet deployable program and how they apply specifically to your agency. So with that, let me go ahead and turn things over to John Phillips. John, you're up next.
Mr. Randall, thank you for that. In my experience, communications is always the foundation for any good response. So appreciate that information. Maybe talk a little bit about real world response as far as state deployable teams. Now, I'll be focusing on EMTF, the Emergency Medical Task Force. I'm the regional coordinator for Region 11, which is South Texas. But this same information applies to a lot of other state deployable teams, such as Texas Task Force 1, TIFNIS teams, even the way the Forest Service and other agencies are regionalized. So that's what we'll talk about is regional responses and from the state region teams. So the mission statement for the Emergency Medical Task Force is state deployable medical teams regionalized for rapid mobilization and readiness. And all that means is we don't keep the teams all in one place. Everybody's not sitting in Austin just waiting for something bad to happen. And most of our state teams are not comprised of state employees. They're comprised of members of other agencies, local fire departments, EMS agencies, things like that, depending on it. And so when a big event, a multi-storm event, COVID, a tornado, things like that, instead of capabilities having to move into a region, we have those capabilities already in the region ready to rapidly respond. And then outside that region, additional resources can come in to back up those initial resources. If you could go to the next slide. So EMTF provides the coordinated responses. We're there to fill the gap between mutual aid and further needs. So when we have an issue at a local level, we reach out to our mutual aid partners, and our neighbors come in and they help. But at some point, we run out of those resources, and that's where these regional resources are, help fill that gap. So traditionally, it's for large-scale incidents or incidents that far exceed the capabilities of the local and regional community. EMTF specifically, we help coordinate with healthcare partners to provide the resources needed, whether it be a hospital that's seeing a surge of patients, where you have like a Las Vegas shooting type incident where you have 800 some odd patients flowing into a smaller hospital, or it be a multi-storm event that basically removes the healthcare system from a region or an area. Like in the Corpus Christi area, if we were to have a large storm impacting this area, the hospitals in this region basically become unavailable. And so we have to move those existing patients and then new patients outside the area to others. And that's where EMTF helps do that. Do that through a few different ways. We can use the ambuses and the ambulances that you see there in the picture. We can also set up mobile hospitals in an affected region for immediate care. And all that's built through being rapidly deployable with the regional resources, integrating with capabilities. So knowing our partners well ahead of time, well before the event could happen, and then integrating into the local command and control elements. When our teams deploy, they go out the door self-sufficient for 72 hours. That gives us time to set up the logistics train behind that, from the state aspect as to how we're going to feed people, house people, water, all the things that it takes to supply our troops when they're out in the field. EMTF is NIMS compliant. We require that of all our partners, and we integrate into that system that we use here in Texas. And then the modular deployment options. Depending on what the need is for a local area, we can scale our response to them. So if they need help with medical personnel, nurses and doctors, we can scale that to fit what their actual request is instead of sending them a one-size-fits-all package, where they may only need 10 or 15 providers to help augment a smaller hospital. We're able to do that versus sending them a complete team that has 80 personnel, and now they have additional issues of where do we house these people, how do we feed them, things like that. So it is modular and it's scalable. If you could go to the next slide. So EMTF has a lot of different options, basically, and it's we call it kind of a cafeteria plan. Again, it's modular, so you get the thing that you need. Ambulance strike teams is probably one of the most used options, where a local area is affected. The EMS agency is overwhelmed with the number of need versus their capability to respond to that. And so we'll augment that with additional ambulances from outside their region. These are regional partners that work on ambulances every day. This is what they do, but it's an extension of mutual aid. So we bring that from outside the affected region. They come in and they integrate with the local resources. Ambuses also come along with those in a lot of cases, depending on the size. Ambuses is basically a large ambulance that can carry up to 22, let's say your yellow, your medium, not critical patients, but not your green walking wounded type folks. So they can move 22 people. This helps a lot in evacuations of nursing homes, hospitals, state schools, things like that, where it frees up the ambulances for the more critical patients. Mobile medical units are your mobile hospitals. For the older crowd, it's your MASH unit type scenario where we can come in, set up a tent hospital in a parking lot or a field in the affected area and help replace potentially a hospital system that's offline due to whatever event. Nurse strike teams are a part of the mobile medical unit, but they also can be a standalone. And we've seen nurse strike teams used, or a version of that, used heavily over the last year, with COVID overrunning the resources of most hospitals in the nation, not just the state. These types of teams come in, those nurses integrate with the local staff, work side by side with them, and just expand their capability within the walls of the existing hospital. Air medical services and coordination is used pretty heavily in large multi-storm responses. That's where we're having to fly out those critical patients that the time of a ground transport would be detrimental to their outcome. And so we're able to coordinate and respond with all the air medical services within the state using basically air traffic controllers on the ground, and then through the state coordination office as the clearinghouse for which which response element is going to go to what area and then where they're going to transport to. Infectious disease response unit is something that definitely got used quite a bit. So that was a capability that came online after Ebola, and the state was asked us to come up with a solution for that. We never foresaw using it to the scale that we did over the last year. But the work had been done, the plans were in place, the training had been done, and so we were able to scale that and benefit. And that, like I said, over the last year, that far outran what we ever thought we would do in that type of situation. Mass fatality operations is another option or another capability that we have for when we have the worst outcome from a large scale event, and we need to manage the fatalities in an area that may not have the resources to handle the need. And so those are mobile units that are brought in from outside the region. That comes with storage options, along with the trained medical personnel for cataloging, processing, and evaluating from other ME offices within the state. If you could go to the next slide. So again, all emergencies start local, in local. We ask for our mutual aid partners to help within the region. And then when it exceeds those capabilities, we bring in the state resources to help with that. And in Texas, that's done through your emergency management coordinators, through TDEM, and using the STAR process. If you would go to the next slide. So up next, we have Lieutenant Commander Pancal. He's the draft supervisor for Coast Guard District 8. Lieutenant Commander, go ahead.
Thanks, John, and good morning, everyone. It's great to be here, and I'm so thankful for the organizers and sponsors of this event, because it's initiatives like this and other things that all of you do that are participating and viewing this conference that make our communities more resilient and better prepared, and I'm just humbled to be a part of it. As I was watching the video by HEB, I couldn't help but think about how the 2020 season was very different, not just in terms of the amount of storms and the length of the season and the endurance that was needed, but also because of the challenges that were presented by COVID-19 and the supply chain issues that we faced, the shelter issues and how we were going to manage physical distancing and the social distancing requirements, and whether or not we were going to need to do testing or distributing masks, and all the different things that came along with COVID-19 that added increased challenges to the season, just on top of the intensity of the season itself. Just showed just how resilient we truly are as communities. And it's our opportunity to take these lessons and build them into our ongoing processes. It looks like some of those issues will continue with us in the 2021 season, as we still look at some supply chain shortages and other issues as we look to manage the COVID-19 response carrying on to the future and other different pandemic-like events. Now, a little history on the, overlay of what the 8th Coast Guard District is. So the 8th Coast Guard District manages all the field response activities from the Texas-Mexico border all the way to the Florida Panhandle in Tallahassee, Florida, and then up the Mississippi River all the way to the state of Minnesota, and all navigable waterways that are tributaries to the Mississippi River. So we cover a portion or all of 26 states. We're the biggest Coast Guard district, and we're also the busiest. And so as a storm starts to form at the 8th Coast Guard District headquarters in New Orleans, Louisiana, we start to decide, well, where's the storm going to impact? What assets do we need to surge in? We look at all of our different coastal sectors and even our inland sectors, and we look at where we can move aviation assets and shallow water assets to provide support to any search and rescue activities. We also look at what waterways are going to be impacted, because we need to get those ports opened up as quickly as possible to facilitate commerce. As many of you know, that our ports are the lifeblood of the country. So we need to do everything we can to get those ports operating in a quick and efficient manner and safely, so that no one is further impacted by not opening the ports too quickly. And so as we look at these different things, we start to move around our aids to navigation resources and other teams. And then we have to look at what units of ours are going to be impacted as well. And that's typical for every storm. But now you throw in the 2020 season, and at one point where we had Laura and Mark go in the Gulf at the same time, you have ongoing response activities to Laura while Delta comes into the exact same location. You have at one portion us housed at the 8th Coast Guard District in New Orleans facing Zeta, while also managing activities in the response of Laura and Delta and Sally. So currently managing operations in 4 states simultaneously while also facing a direct landfall of a hurricane. So you had all these challenges, and it really emphasizes the things that every good emergency manager should keep in the back of their mind as vital skill sets to have: the skills of endurance, redundancy, collaboration, and flexibility. And this season really showed how vital those skills truly are to our operations. If you go ahead and flip to the next slide, please. So as we looked at this, so typically when we have to make a decision on what of our Coast Guard resources are going to be truly impacted by this so that we can conduct all of our statutory missions in response to a hurricane. And first and foremost being safety of life. So we want to make sure that we can quickly get all the resources in to that affected area so that they can respond as quickly as possible and conduct search and rescue operations immediately. And so we'll surge in aviation assets from all over the country, and also our shallow water assets will be moved in. And now in this situation of the 2020 season, we had many of our different units were going to be directly impacted. And so we have what we call continuity of operations, or COOP. And so when that happens, we relocate our units to a secondary site. And in the issue of the 2020 season, often we couldn't just use our secondary site, we had to use our tertiary sites because some of our secondary sites were impacted as well. And so at one portion in time, while we were managing ongoing operations for Laura and Sally during Delta, we had to move the 8th Coast Guard District Area Command staff to St. Louis, Missouri, so that we could guarantee that we could manage all of our search and rescue assets and all the different things that were moving around and all the components and even the pollution response missions in the aids to navigation to clear out those waterways. So there was a lot of moving parts going on. And during all of that, we have about a little over 33,000 active duty civilian and reservist members in the Coast Guard throughout Coast Guard District 8. And during that time, 2,426 of those members were evacuated at some portion of time. And some of those people had to perform some of those missions. So we had to fly in backfills or do different things to get them working in those areas. And so it provided challenges, and especially in the Lake Charles area where we had our entire marine safety unit disabled from Hurricane Laura, we had to look at providing alternate sites for people to work from so that we could get those waterways functioning again. So as we moved forward, we also looked at how we were going to get those people back in their homes, where 341 of those members had their homes damaged to the point where they could not return to them immediately. And so those members, while wanting to get back to work, also had to find alternate arrangements. So we looked at all those different things that typically are usually small numbers for us in the Coast Guard, were kind of bigger in the 2020 season. And we had 35 port closures throughout. Now, some of those are double counted ports because in different storms, ports got closed more than once throughout the season, which also has, slows down commerce in that area and, correlates to direct dollars lost in the area and economic losses. So as we did that, we had to fix 1,606 aids to navigation to make sure those waterways were clear and moving forward. And one of the other elements we look at in the Coast Guard is we also monitor and inspect the oil and gas industry in both state waters and in federal waters, and especially in the outer continental shelf. And so we look at different ways to keep that commerce flowing. And we work with them to make sure that they shut in appropriately during an advancing storm so that there's not a big pollution incident. And throughout the 2020 season, we had the entire Gulf of Mexico outer continental shelf oil and gas production was shut in at 84% or greater for 6 days, which is a huge economic loss. Some of those situations were $68 million a day or $72 million a day, depending on the situation. And throughout the entire season from June to October, the end of October, it was shut in at varying degrees as well. And so at the height, 84% with those high numbers of economic loss, but there was definitely other degrees of economic loss throughout that we had to look at and work to get the right inspectors out to make sure that we could get things flowing again as fast as possible to facilitate commerce and to ensure that the economic losses were as little as possible. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. And this slide, I really wanted to showcase that we surged in all of these many assets, and although the total search and rescue cases was fairly low at only 20 cases, because of the length of the season, from August 19th until the very end of October, we were managing some form of hurricane activity. And we also were responding to COVID-19. So you look at those large numbers of mobilized assets. And so inside District 8 could be from any of those 26 states that I mentioned within the inland river zone or even along the Gulf Coast, or outside the district could be anywhere, and the Coast Guard has a resource throughout the country. Typically those come from Florida and the East Coast, but they could come from other places as well. So as we looked at, not a lot of activities, there was a lot of flight hours and a lot of search to make sure that the waterways were open and different things were flowing good, but there wasn't a lot of search and rescue activity. So one might think that our fatigue levels were low, but what the season really showed us is there's a high need for endurance, even when we're not out there necessarily saving a lot of lives, because we had to continually move resources throughout the country and mobilize them back and forth to make sure that they could respond to any incident. As the storms kept coming in, and we had that long period of over 2 months of continuous operations, it just continues to weigh in on the members that respond and deploy for those operations. And additionally, we had different types of pollution events that went on. For Hurricane Laura, we had a mission assignment assigned from the state of Louisiana to do Emergency Support Function 10. And there they managed all the hazards to the environment and to the public with the pollution response and hazardous materials. And then also in Hurricane Sally, there was another mission where they didn't actually ask for a mission assignment, but we still needed to mitigate the environmental concerns. And so they had to respond directly to both Florida and Alabama to mitigate those concerns. So we deployed Coast Guard members for both of those. So all throughout the season, we continued to have to respond to many different situations. And it just showed the resiliency of the Coast Guard, the resiliency of our state partners, of our federal partners, and all of our industry partners. And going forward, I'm very optimistic that we'll be even more prepared for the 2021 season. And having said that, I now pass it over to Mr. Patrick Knapp from the Regional Disaster Officer from the American Red Cross.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, everyone. My name is Patrick Knapp. I'm with the American Red Cross. I want to talk to you a little bit this morning about non-congregate sheltering. It was a big push and a preference for us during last year's hurricane season. Presently, we're still kind of in that mode because of COVID and the pandemic situation. Before we get too far into the slides, I thought I'd give you kind of a little context with where Red Cross fits in the food chain here. Many of you probably know we are congressionally chartered to carry out one of the ESFs, ESF 6. We're one of the few non-federal entities or agencies that have that charge. And so, you know, our big push is to really care for people. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what Red Cross does. But when we look at the pandemic and we look at getting in how we do sheltering, you know, one thing that was really clear going into the pandemic and coming into this new hurricane season, you know, what we do really didn't change at all. You know, the needs are the same, depending on, and regardless of the pandemic, you know, people still need safe shelter. They're still going to need food and water. They're still going to be hungry. There's a big need for our residents and our constituents to have information and to have people help them with the recovery. And of course, the big part for us, because we are the people, it's that emotional care and support, whether it be our mental health counselors, our spiritual care providers or supporters, or just a friendly face, you know. So that give me a little bit of context there, but you know, what we do, like I said, didn't change, but how we do it did change. So we made a pivot last season to non-congregate shelter. That's been our preference since last season. Going into the new season, we're going to be making some changes. But with that came a couple of new things. We had some new safety controls, and then the posture of our health services, our licensed medical providers and service providers. Their role changed from a reactive and responsive to a much more proactive role in sheltering. So, you know, what is non-congregate sheltering? You know, when you think about a traditional shelter, you probably have those warm, fuzzy moments of seeing people all having a great time on their cot in the gym or at the Union Hall or at an activity center at the rec center there in the community. Non-congregate sheltering, you know, we don't do that quite the same, and there's a real big reason, right? Non-congregate sheltering was organized the way it was this last year to stop the spread of the infection. When we do non-congregate sheltering, what it allows us to do is it mitigates convergence, right? And it limits the size and the number and the occurrence of gatherings. So that was really a big push for us. And for us internally, leveraging the things you see on the screen there, that comes with a lot of infrastructure. And that really allowed us as an entity to reduce the risk for infection and spread, not only to our clients, but also to our workforce. We really could use some of the services at those sites and really have less folks there. But again, our goals and our principles, remain the same, whether it was a congregate shelter or non-congregate shelter. Number one is we care for people. People care is our primary activity, always has been, always will be. In non-congregate sheltering, the number one priority is safety. The safety of the residents and the safety of our workforce and our partners as well. Our objective, it stays the same as well. Our objective in sheltering, whether it's during the COVID and pandemic situation or not, has been to transition people back to their homes or back to suitable living, right? And then to support them during that period of transition. So you see there on the screen some of the things that we employed last year in the coastal bend area, actually along the entire Gulf Coast, from the Beaumont Orange area to the coastal bend area, and definitely down with the folks there in the Rio Grande Valley. We did quite a bit of different stuff. We had Catholic retreats that we used up in Deep East Texas, where we had folks that were almost in a conference center. And it was really kind of nice for their recovery, for their mental health. It brought that down. It kept them from being in large groups of people. It was really kind of nice. We did have some unique challenges with the non-congregate sheltering approach. One of the big things was we now know all we never wanted to know about RVs and trailers. We've had a little bit of work, and we'll graciously let FEMA take that back on this next hurricane season. It was lots of fun for us, but I think we're good for the year. Next slide, please. So looking at, some of the adjustments we did for the season, we put out a set of safety protocols that we called the CDC. And we did that for a couple of reasons. One, we found that just having a simple and direct message is easy to remember, easy for people to follow, right? The other thing is that all of our protocols are in alignment with the CDC. And it was a way to kind of reinforce that message to our workforce that no mask means no work. And just straightforward and simple things like this. So when we talk about cover in our protocols, we're talking about face covering, we're talking about covering materials, we're covering our hands, and with the distancing, I think the folks from the Coast Guard talked about that. When we looked at the just distancing alone in shelters, that had a dramatic effect on our sheltering capability going into last hurricane season if we were going to use the congregate shelters, which in some cases, unfortunately, we had to do that. But with the advent of the social distancing protocols, our safety controls and sheltering, in effect, we lost our sheltering capacity went down to about a third of what it was here along the Texas Gulf Coast to allow for that distancing. So in a way to recoup some of that, we really tried to look at alternate means, and that's where the non-congregate sheltering came into play. And then cleaning, of course, the big thing for us is, with shelters, we're often under the same standards from the health department as your local restaurants. Consider us hopefully as clean and hopefully even more clean than your Texas Laredo taco or your Laredo taco companies there in the Stripes and in the 7-Elevens. We have to follow all the same rules. The food has to stay, either colder than 40 degrees or above 140. And then we have to have all the same sanitation stuff. But when you look at the COVID, what we call our COVID compendium, and you look at our CDC protocols, we had quite a bit of an enhanced sanitation that we had to put into place last year. We also had to have quite a bit of PPE that was above and beyond what we normally would have. We've always had health services in our shelters since the beginning. But the difference this last year and even today, and in some parts of the country where we're operating some shelters is, we never had to have an isolation kit before, right? And we never had to have the enhanced debris management and sanitation stuff that we do now. And we've got that. It's pretty clean. So when we talk PPE, it's above and beyond just the PPE for the individual, but in some cases it's PPE for the facility or for different zones or lines of effort within that shelter. So, one of the other big things we did this last year is, we've always done a wellness check when people are in shelters, but it's usually kind of passive. It's when we are noting some folks are having difficulty with the recovery, or we know they've got health concerns. That kind of went amped up this last season to where we do an initial wellness and health screening when you come into the sheltering network. And then every day, a nurse will talk to you while you're in your hotel, while you're in your dorm, what have you. And we found that not only from a health services standpoint, but from a mental health standpoint, that provided a lot of comfort for people. For us, having folks outside of the gym and in their own hotel room really solved a lot of the pains we see in shelters. Our theft went down. The concern with pets wasn't nearly the issue that it's been in the past. The different acceptable levels of behavior between families, you didn't have some of that mixing like you do in the large congregate shelter, and that works really well. The downside to it is the fear and people being holed up in their rooms without really any access or any interplay with other people. So those wellness checks, we found not only from a practical standpoint for what we needed, but from an emotional standpoint and a service, it really, really did well for the clients. I have no doubt we'll be keeping that going forward. We did a lot of disposable thermometers and single-use masks. All that got distributed to clients and partners and volunteers and workforces that came in. Talked a little bit about the PPE for the feeding, but one of the things that was kind of unique that we did this last year, we've always been big that when we open shelters, it's 3 meals a day. Just because we moved them into a campground and an RV park or a church camp, we're still doing the same thing. But the big difference is you don't see the big kitchens like you would normally see, right? What you'd see this last year and presently and what we're doing in parts of the state for the flood is you're seeing a lot of packaged meals. So, and for us, we tried to be as smart and as safe as possible. So you may not have seen Red Cross feeding at some of the shelters in your area. What you may have seen is the pizza delivery person showing up, or Uber Eats, or Postmates, or one of those other unique things. That was us. And that was us trying not to get our workforce sick, not to put anybody else at risk. And when we did do the delivery, so often we would have the big things delivered to the hotels. Our protocols were we would walk them to the rooms of people so they didn't all come gather in the lobby. But we would send the food to the rooms almost like we're your pizza delivery guy. The difference was we would knock on the door, we'd set it down, and we'd step back. So there was no hand-to-hand transfers, none of that type of stuff. So those were some of the adjustments we made last year. I will say, with the wellness checks that we did at intake, that while that is a big, strong safety control we had, that was also put into context. So if that looked like it was going to create some gathering, our number one focus was to move people onto the rooms, and then that way we could do the health screenings dispersed. So we could limit the exposure to folks. Okay, next slide, final slide, rather. Okay, good. Sorry, I can't see through my notes here. So this year, we're going to be pivoting back to our preference, our preference to congregate sheltering. Now that we're starting to see the infection rates drop, and more importantly, the vaccination rates run through the roof, which is really great to see for us. You'll start to see us move out of the hotel world and back into the gyms and the churches and the activity centers. We, as a nonprofit, we want to do the most good, and that allows us to do more good than putting it in margins of vendors. But saying that, we are going to go back to traditional sheltering. That's not the only thing we're going to do. I think the world has changed for us a little bit when it comes to this. So depending on the local risk, that we've got high infection rates or we've got a surge coming on, absolutely, we'll probably stay in the non-congregate sheltering business. But we won't start there. That's not where the discussion will start. Sometimes, though, non-congregate is not always the way we can go. You think about the enhanced screening and the safety protocols. You know, the nurses have been busy. The medical professionals have been really busy. And for us, with 90% of our workforce being volunteers, at times we just can't get them. So in those cases, we have to consolidate things. So non-congregate might not be the option. We are going to pivot in June. I wish I could share a lot more with you on that. For this, unfortunately, we're going through some of the protocols we put in place last year to see what we want to keep going into this new year and what we want to adjust, right? So, you know, for example, last year we said no unsolicited donations. We just didn't want to take the chance. You know, the science is all over the place on this early on in the pandemic. I think we've gotten some clarity on how long things stay on surfaces and what is there any change in that. We're working through that. You know, going into COVID, we looked at capping congregate shelters at 50 people, 50 individuals per shelter period. You know, and that's near and dear to my heart after standing in the floor of the Astrodome after Katrina. 50 people would have been a little quieter and a little calmer, but that may not be practical, right? So we'll look at that going into this season. We'll probably keep our safety champions and doing the safety call stand downs, just like you would in the health, safety, environment world. They're in oil and gas. I think the Coast Guard folks know all about that wonderful stuff. I have no doubt we'll continue the wellness checks and the screenings that work really well for us. And I would imagine that our footprints will continue to work more and more virtually, but not solely. I mean, if you look at the big pivot we made to non-congregate shelter, typically in a shelter, we have 14 different lines of effort or support. When we went to non-congregate sheltering, we dropped that to 3. I think that's pretty lean in a congregate setting, but there's probably a happy balance, and that's the kind of stuff we're working through now. I appreciate your time. I'm going to end there and pass it back to the moderator. I think that we were going to try and do some questions if there were a couple minutes. So end of my presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank all the panelists. I do have a question for Mr. Randall. With today's reliance on tech and communications, what are your thoughts on bringing communications back up in multiple areas? And specifically, is there anything you're seeing at a local level that can be done to expedite this?
Yes, and it goes back to the planning. It goes back to the relationships that were talked about earlier in the presentations. Having those relationships built, working with your providers to be able to bring not only the LTE communications, but our LMR communications back up really quickly. And that's what we saw in the hurricane examples that we've had in the past, and what we saw in Laura and everything that happened in Louisiana, is being able to roll in assets to bring that up as quickly as possible while we're in the process of trying to restore power and restore those damaged facilities. So having that plan in place, you know, planning is everything. That's what we keep talking about, and then having those relationships built. I think that's the key to success in that instance.
Thank you, sir. Next one, John Phillips. Do you recognize any gaps in training at the local level that can assist with the response that isn't being done, or are there items that are working really well that can be enhanced on regarding EMTF?
Constant struggle that we have, and I don't think it's just EMTF. I think most state response type teams struggle with this. Is the most capable folks, the ones that we're looking for these types of deployments, that have the experience, the leadership skills, and the operational experience, tend to time out after a number of years. They move up in their own individual organizations into administrative roles and tend to not be as deployable as your, I would say, the middle ranks of agencies, whether it's fire, EMS. I think we see this in police and even in public works areas for those strike teams, that folks time themselves out. So it's not that it's a revolving door, but it's a constant training process of finding the new talent, mentoring that new talent into the upper leadership roles. But that is a gap that I think we struggle with and probably always will.
Copy that. Thank you, John. Next, for Lieutenant Commander Pankow. Are there any specific items or reoccurring things that are going on in regards to response that can be enhanced on the local level? Are you seeing anything specifically that could address or enhance the response, coordinates, landmarks, or preferred methods of contact?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for that question. Communications, as was mentioned earlier, is the backbone of every response. And that's something that can always be enhanced. I'm proud to be participant in the state of Texas's Natural Disasters Operation Work Group, which is one of the leading initiatives in the country on exercising communications and working to better that. And so I think more exercises like that at the local level to look at your communications is obviously a good thing. Also, in today's world, we have notifications coming in from all different sources, especially when the 911 operators are overwhelmed. They could come in via social media or other avenues. And sometimes we need to make sure that we're all coordinating that together, because the worst thing that we can do is put our response personnel in an unsafe condition. And so, many of the operations we do in storm response are inherently dangerous. And so the better that we can facilitate that communications to know when certain people have been rescued or things have been mitigated, that helps us a lot. So we don't put our air crews downrange to do a rescue where there's already been a rescue conducted and things like that. So the more that we can close the loop on what everybody's doing in those operations, I think will also help us be safe. And then kind of going along the lines of that with our hazmat and pollution response, we recognize that the majority of boat owners are responsible boat owners, and given the time, they're going to take care of their boats. But we come in right after response and we start to evaluate targets. And so the quicker that we can get that communication out and that start to do that outreach to find out which boat owners are capable and willing to do something about their boat, or if there was an abandoned drum or propane tank or something of that nature, it helps us understand which are the primary targets that we could need to mitigate first and foremost.
Thank you, sir, very much. What a great panel. We'll run out of time for questions. We want to thank you for all that you're doing in assisting us. We're now going to take another quick break and return at the top of the hour for our final panel. In the meantime, please enjoy these short videos from our generous sponsors, AEP and Cheniere. Cue videos.
Hello, I'm Judith Talavera, President and Chief Operating Officer for AEP Texas. August 25th marks the day Hurricane Harvey impacted our South Texas region. It was one of the most devastating storms to impact us in nearly 50 years. Hurricane Harvey's fury brought with it major destruction to our electrical system and left more than 200,000 customers without power. In fact, many people are still dealing with the severe residential and commercial property damage it caused. But we are Texas strong, and thousands of workers from across the state and nation came to assist us and helped us to get back on our feet. Major weather events like Hurricane Harvey serve as a reminder to heed all warnings and to always have a plan that protects your loved ones and your personal property. At AEP Texas, we don't know when the next storm will come, but we do know that we provide a service that is essential to everyone's daily lives. When the next storm does come, we will be prepared and committed to restoring your service as safely and as quickly as possible. For more information on how you can prepare for severe weather, please go to aeptexas.com. We are AEP Texas.
When we first got here, we had two things: an empty field and an idea. The field was muddy. Heck, some people thought the idea was too. There was one thing we knew for sure. You don't build the first from-scratch LNG export facility in the United States with just a field and a dream. You need commitment, customers, teamwork, support, community. Early on, we had believers. It started with our customers. They saw the potential we saw, the cleaner energy we could provide. Our leaders in Washington, Austin, and throughout the coastal bend did too. They recognized the energy revolution here in America that could deliver cleaner energy to the world, and that the coastal bend could be a gateway to that growing future. Everything about this place is massive. Each storage tank can fit a Boeing 767. There's about 66,000 tons of structural steel, 310 miles of pipe, 327,000 cubic yards of concrete, and 2,500 miles of electrical cable. Well, that's enough to cover the distance between California and North Carolina. There's nearly enough steel to build 7 Eiffel Towers. And the amount of concrete here alone could build more than 39,000 swimming pools. And the ships? Well, they're almost 1,000 feet long. What has this place meant for the coastal bend?
In all, we've invested over $15 billion and we've created jobs.
Lots of them. Our construction workforce exceeded 4,000 at its peak. And this place will employ hundreds of Cheniere employees and contractors for decades. And from the looks of things, we're not done growing here either. Now, you don't live in the coastal bend and not fall in love with this place. The community, the spirit, the natural beauty. Cheniere can't ever repay the support we've been given here in the coastal bend, but we're going to keep trying as long as we're here. We know that building something this big doesn't come without disruption. More traffic, more activity. We live here too, so we get it. But we really appreciate the support and patience we've been given, especially by those who live close by. That's been the biggest realization about this LNG facility, that the facility isn't the most important thing we've built here. It's the lives and families and homes we've built here in the coastal bend. We knew the dream was big, but we knew the dedication there was too. We've built this place on time, on budget, and we've done it safely. And it's now more than an LNG plant. It's a connection between the United States and the entire world. What we've done here will deliver cleaner energy around the world.
I'm proud to be a part of this project, part of Team Cheniere and everyone who's supported us. And I'm excited to see what's next.
Hi, welcome back to the 2021 Coast of Bend Hurricane Conference, a multiple storm challenge. We're so pleased to have you stay with us for this ongoing discussion. Our third and final panel today will focus on virtual coordination. As you all know, this past year with COVID, it's been a significant transition for how all of us plan and how we interact with each other. We're very spoiled here in the Coast of Bend. We have relatively light travel. We're used to just hopping in a vehicle and just kind of jumping from one meeting to the next. It's already been mentioned that our success during an emergency is built on our relationships. We've accomplished this because before and after the meetings, we exchanged business cards, we've told tall tales, and we've learned about common interest. We come up with great ideas, such as a hurricane conference, usually over a lunch and a few laughs. But since we've all gone through this last year of transition and we started to work from home, or we were conducting all of our meetings online, and lots of our training has been canceled, it's really changed the dynamic of how we network. It's not all been bad though. We have learned some lessons. We've sent our employees home for the first time. We've learned that they can't actually work from home if you don't provide them with adequate equipment, infrastructure such as internet. We've learned through some of our storm events that although we have great continuity plans and our emergency operations centers are extremely resilient and have backup power and backup utilities, when you send those same employees home, they don't have those same abilities when they're in their home environment. So all of these new skills, this new equipment, this has really helped to support virtual emergency operations centers, helps us to maintain situation awareness, and I believe has enhanced all of our ability to maintain our continuity for our internal operations and those that are with our government partners. So today, our panel of experts that we've invited here are going to talk about some of the technology that they've used to help support their ongoing planning and response. Kind of give a quick introduction to them, and we'll turn it over to them. First up, we have John J. Nelson. He's an assistant professor at Del Mar College at the Department of Computer Science, Engineering, and Advanced Technology. He specializes in geographic information systems and cryptography. He also works with the Artificial Intelligence Institute Consortium for Environmental Science and also Unmanned Aircraft Systems Technology Education Consortium. We also have with us Mr. Garrett Hogo. He's the Director of Special Initiatives with the Coast of Bend Council of Governments and also serves as their Chief Information Security Officer. Next up, we'll have Joaquin Jaimes. He's the Manager of Emergency Preparedness for HEB. He's been with the company for 26 years. Joaquin holds a bachelor's in emergency services and is currently a grad student majoring in emergency management leadership at Waldorf University. Our final panelist will be Sam Miller. He's the Operations Technology Field Operations Unit Chief for the Texas Division of Emergency Management. He's been with Texas Division of Emergency Management since 2013, and during disasters, he and his expert team efficiently solve real-world problems using technologies. So with that, John, you're up first.
This has been an exciting event, and I look forward to seeing you all again next year, but virtually this has been pretty darn good. Well done indeed. So my name is John J. Nelson. Of course, I already said I'm assistant professor in the Department of Computer Science, Engineering, and Advanced Technology. My main area is geospatial technology and cartography. Well, we have some exciting news. UAS Tech, which is the Unmanned Airplane System Technology Education Consortium, our mission is to incorporate UAS technology into South Texas. We plan to build and implement, which will be an NIST, ASTM designed UAS Basic Pilot Proficiency Training and Testing Center on the West Campus. Why do we want to do this? Well, the purpose of the GISC UAS program is to introduce students, all students, returning students, new students, to the emerging world of using UAS systems in multiple workplaces for data collection, reconnaissance, research, temporal and real-time data collection, and post-analysis. UAVs are in the news every day. You see them highlighted across many different occupations. Soon, the Federal Aviation, the FAA will be releasing also new rules and regulations governing the use of UAV in multiple use sectors. I always suggest that you stay updated on all those changes. It's very important. So in regards to certified pilots, including commercial operators, public and safety, government, educational users, critical infrastructure, and public venues, and other advanced operations. Those are the ones I'm going to concentrate mostly on in regards to why we're setting up this training and testing center for remote pilots in command. And then to a lesser extent, of course, also the needs of civilians and hobbyists and recreational flyers and so on. So we have two new sites planned to be built. One is going to be indoor, and the other one is outdoor, as well as potentially later an embedded UAS obstacle course. Okay, so this is going to be at the Del Mar College West campus. The FEMA Dome is where we're going to have the inside obstacle course that will then be temporary. We'll set it up as needed and take down as needed, depending on the use that particular day. The outdoor one will be between the FEMA Dome. This is on the West campus at Del Mar, the FEMA Dome and the Fire Academy. I don't know if you've been to the West campus, but there's that fire tower. So between the FEMA Dome and the Fire Academy area, there's this fire tower, which will probably also be part of what will be the embedded use too. So that's where we plan on building it. We have all the material and we're ready to get started on it. So it's going to be designed via what we've received from the NIST, which is the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and also the ASTM, which was international, which was formerly the American Society for Testing and Materials. They, together with the FAA, have come up with a design rubrics for the development of the testing center, the training center, and the testing center. And so that's why we keep continuity across the board in regards to the testing and training of said pilots, all right? So our proposed completion date is sometime at the end of summer 2021, which we're gonna then hopefully do our vetting at that period of time, and then be ready for operation and implementation sometime the fall semester of 2021. So the standards for test methods for small UAS aircraft is to establish and implement what are the basic proficiencies in evaluation for remote pilots, okay? Well, first off, before they can begin this, they must have completed a Del Mar College UAS Tech GUAS 2371 Fundamentals of UAS course, or in a light course of some. And also, of course, have completed, well, just have their current FAA 107 remote pilot license. And then the training and testing needs can begin in regards to the obstacle course. The UAS Tech NISUS's training and test obstacle course will meet the needs. Well, what are the needs they're going to meet? Well, for the Fire Academy, just on the West campus, the Police Academy, construction trades, our GIS program, geology program. But here's the big one. For local jurisdictions and institutions within an 8-9 county area that need to have an area for them that is regulated for in regards to what the rubrics is for training and testing, so that their potential UAS pilots will have a place to train and be tested and repeated over and over again. So that's the whole idea. Flying safely in our national airspace requires, of course, the skill sets necessary. And they get that in the regulation end of it with their 107, but in regards to evaluating their positive aircraft control at all times, that's where the training comes in regards to maneuvering their craft. Next slide, please. So it'd be slide 2. So what's the purpose? Well, the test methods for the small unmanned aircraft system, as you can see from this slide, is to quantitatively evaluate various system capabilities of remote pilot proficiency. They are being standardized, as I said, through the NIST and AST and ASTM. They are also referenced as a job performance requirements for the National Fire Protection Association standard for UAS. These test methods are primarily intended for vertical takeoff and landing, but also maneuverability. And we're going to go to that right now. And you can look at those diagrams of the multiple types of courses that are both indoors and outdoors. Okay, so there's circuit flight training with the scores for position, transverse, orbit, spiral, sustained speed, deliver accuracy. So you have maneuvering and payload functionality, position, holding position, rotating, climb, descend, fly straight, fly level, move and rotate, land accurately, take off accurately, performing a number of different movements in regards to manually, orbit, spiral, recon, and so on. But the other thing, and you'll notice those buckets there, that's for identification purposes, for whether it's for real time, but then also for temporal needs too, see what's changed over time. So the position and transverse tests are performed sequentially by remote pilots in direct line of sight with their particular platform. So the pilot's back can be turned to represent flying beyond the visual line, but of course their early testing in regards to indoors and outdoors will all be visual line of sight. So like I mentioned before, the example, each bucket may be inscribed with a letter, a number, or some sort of icon diagram that they'll have to either take an image of, or which they'll be graded on, or they will be right at real time be able to identify based on their maneuverability of not only the platform, but also the camera itself. So you see whether they're looking up straight up, whether they're looking across, whether they're looking it down at certain angles, what have you. So I think you can kind of get an idea of that they'd have to have a pretty good command of the maneuverability of said platform that they're utilizing for their needs. Interesting note, we just purchased 2 Anafi thermal drones that we're going to be using with our fire academy, so they can use those for the purposes of fire detection and different things like that on our training facility, but also hopefully more so with that fire training tower that they have. Next slide, please. I find myself talking a little quick, so I'm wondering if I'm going to be eating up my time pretty darn fast. So training and testing. Okay, what is the training and testing needs? The purpose of the test methods for the UAS is to be able to quantitatively evaluate the various systems capabilities and remote pilot proficiencies of the pilot. They are being standardized through, like I said, the ASTM and the NIST in regards to its performance, the rubrics test that's given, and so on. In regards to flying the small UAS, larger UAS, work interferences, software navigation that they might be utilizing, applications and capabilities, practice procedures that they would go through in regards to certain types of situations that would arise, and so on. Because of course, their situational awareness and their due diligence as a remote pilot in command is paramount, and that's something that they begin to learn when they pass their 107. But through the training area and the testing area, they really are able to put it to test. I guess it's a testing center. So they're able to put it to test to see how they can perform under different circumstances, needing to perform certain types of functions. So the tests are being developed, we like to call safety, capabilities, and proficiency. The test message is the process for evaluating system capabilities for operator proficiency. And here's the deal, that they're all going to be the same. It's continuity. Everything is roughly the same. So when the training is done, when the testing is done, there's continuity and consistency across the board in regards to the training and the testing. That's why we're following the NIST's obstacle course design in their rubric. So we think that this is going to be an excellent addition to what we need here in our coastal bend area. So like I said, so that government jurisdictions, NGOs, as institutes of learning can utilize this, so they can prepare their pilots, remote pilots in command, the best they can. So If you have any questions at the end of the whole panel, I guess you'll be able to ask me that. And I found out that this PowerPoint with some additional information will be potentially available to those that are in need. Once again, you can contact me at Del Mar College. John Nelson. And I think I'm done.
Thank you, John. We appreciate you. It's amazing to see how far along your work has come over these years. So we're going to turn this over to Garrett. You're up next, sir.
Hi there. Thank you. And good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to quickly talk about one of the programs that CBRAC, Coastal Bend Regional Advisory Council, we're using for patient transfers across the state. So next slide, please. So following Hurricane Harvey, the state had been looking for a good solution to patient tracking for all the other items during an emergency. WebEOC's ETN, which is managed by TDM, is a standard for tracking personnel, disaster victims, belongings, pets, vehicles, but something that we identified is it wasn't exactly ideal for tracking interfacility transfers. And those are patients going from one hospital to hospital or healthcare facility to another healthcare facility. Next slide. So this discussion was going on for years, and every region had their own platform and their own capabilities and their own data points that they wanted to keep, because they already did all the training and the work with all their facilities and hospitals, and everything was working smoothly. But the problem is interoperability is key during a disaster. And during all these discussions and these talks, interoperability was not, it was not something that we could use for all of these different platforms. And so, of course, real world incidents don't wait until planning is over. So the 2020 COVID surge forced the hand and then entered Pulsera. Next slide. Pulsera is an application that is used for patient movement that's only available on a cell phone app. You can see the screenshots. It was originally designed for emergency medical services to coordinate transfers to a hospital from the field, and hospitals to coordinate interfacility transports from one facility to another. And it's a fairly new program, but it seemed to have gotten traction pretty quickly, and it was a good solution. The only problem was implementing a new program across the state during a stressful time. I'd say that it was very far from ideal. Next slide. So one of the things that CBRAC did during this implementation is we took over almost all the legwork of entering patient data, coordinating with the transfer centers, coordinating with the end physicians, facilities, nurses, and inputting that information into Pulsera and contacting and coordinating with the rest of the state and all of our other counterparts throughout the state of Texas and the EMTF State Coordination Center. We had daily calls, we had a constant chat going, and we were getting patients out to other areas of the state. And this began with the surge in El Paso, and then it kind of, it grew from there. One of the things that we learned is sometimes the perfect solution will come out of nowhere, and we all have to be flexible enough to take advantage of those solutions when they present themselves. So one of the main patients that after the initial surge with El Paso, we were realizing that it was very difficult to find ECMO beds. So extracorporeal membrane oxygenation is basically a heart and lung machine that the patient is connected to that were able to help stabilize COVID patients that had severe respiratory distress. And this became the de facto solution that we used throughout the state and coordinating these patient transfers outside of the state when there was nowhere else available within the state of Texas. And so these patients were challenging to place before COVID, and it was exponentially more difficult after COVID to find an increasing amount of beds when those beds were very finite and getting these patients the help that they needed. Next slide. So this is a continuation. overall, the operations were very successful and many patients were placed in the facility they needed to receive care. And the main lesson learned that I can bring to you from 2020 and COVID and all the different disasters, whether it was the winter weather events, hurricanes, and the middle of a pandemic, it's important to be flexible no matter the situation. And as long as we keep the needs of our patients and our community as the unwavering guiding light moving forward, it will eventually lead us out of the darkness. And everybody here today, you have a very, very critical place in this coordination and the overall care for our community. And it's important that we all remain flexible together and work as a team so that we can continue to take care of our community and everybody who requires our help. And I'll go ahead and I'll end it there and we can move forward.
Thank you, Garrett. We appreciate it. Next up, we have Joaquin. Go ahead and take the presentation, sir.
So go ahead and we'll go to the first slide here. What you'll see here is a high-level timeline of our transition to a virtual emergency operations center, which was something new for us in 2020, as it was for many. So in early January, we started hearing the rumblings of the pandemic, of the virus in the eastern part of the world. So we began our strategic planning with our leadership right after our pandemic plan review. Fast forward into February, we held our first tabletop on February 1st of 2020 regarding a potential for a pandemic. And then we activated our Emergency Operations Center in person on February 26th. And we held that Emergency Operations Center in person until mid to late March. Once March, the late part of March came around, of course, we were going through many transitions, as many of us were. CDC guidelines were starting to take place, where we had to move to a larger conference room, to another building, which provided us a little bit safer environment. We were able to social distance. We went ahead and began our temp check process, even though that wasn't a mandate at the time. And of course, our daily sanitization was also in progress as well. So once we had that first elevated temp, that first positive case, we went ahead and moved to a virtual operation right at the end of March. And we've maintained that virtual operation ever since end of March. Our campuses have never closed, but safety always being our number one priority. We gave those that had the ability to work from home the option to work from home and encouraged it based on CDC guidelines. Also, we were wanting to be compliant with the state guidelines as well, with the stay-at-home orders that were in place in early spring last year. So the virtual operation has worked fairly well for us. And we've maintained that throughout the year. Next slide, please. So again, our missions never changed. Everything that we do is dictated by people. It's always been about our partners, which are our employees, and customer safety, making sure that our stores remain safe and that people are able to work safely and to shop safely. So what our virtual EOC model looked like was we held company leadership meetings 2 times a day, every day, Monday through Sunday through May, until we started to see that first wave decrease a little bit. We maintained our company leadership meetings every week, and we still do to this day. We've modified those quite a bit since the beginning of the pandemic, but we still hold those meetings. Outside of those meetings, we've established many strategic meetings around our critical items like product, people, and most recently began in December our vaccine strategy and how we were going to roll that out. Next slide, please. So as we all know, disasters don't yield their time to other disasters. So we've had to maintain this model throughout 2020. And we did so through this last hurricane season very successfully. So what we did was we created a 24/7 Zoom meeting for hurricanes. Anytime there was any type of tropical storm or hurricane threat to the Gulf Coast, we went ahead and established those 24/7 meetings so we could have conversations pre, during, and post landfall, and leaders could hop on and off as available. It wasn't a requirement for somebody to stay on 24/7, but at least it was an open line of communication where people could just like if we were in person, come to the EOC and leave as needed. Some of the other events that we managed virtually this year were the 2020 election. We began our preparations in September for that, and then activated the week leading into the election, and then also post-election, and also through the inauguration. We had a partial EOC activation through the inauguration in January. And also, as we all experienced Winter Storm Uri, we began our EOC, our virtual EOC on February 5th, which was a Friday, and deactivated that late February. Next slide, please. So some key lessons learned through 2020 and even through the first parts of 2021 is, number one, be aggressive with scheduling. If you're in charge of communications or hosting your meetings, coordinate with leadership if you have access to them, especially your top leadership. You want to be mindful of the business. I like to personally give as much advance notice as I can, get that on people's calendars so they can move things around, especially if it's going to be an all hands meeting. Consider setting a consistent time for your meetings. For example, we use 11 o'clock for us. It gives everybody a time in the morning to get their offline meetings handled, and then also their afternoon to do the same. One thing that we want to make sure that we do is control the meetings, control the controllables during the meetings. So manage your agenda strictly, manage the off-topic conversations. Very easy to get into the weeds. And what we ask of our leaders is our all hands meeting, our company leadership meetings are a report out and not necessarily a working session. So we encourage them to go ahead and have offline meetings and then report out at the 11 o'clock for the next 24 to 48 hours of what their outlook looks like. Communication is very critical. I think we've heard that throughout the morning today from various divisions and leaders. And so what we did was publish our meeting minutes on our dashboard on our what we call a PartnerNet. It's an internal intranet-based communication tool. And then we also emailed a recap after each meeting, and we also used after-action reports frequently throughout the year for every event that we managed, and that really helped us capture and identify any opportunities and improve and create plans for improvement. What's very important also is to evaluate and mitigate any single points of failure. So for example, people, if you have somebody doing that, if you have one person that knows how to do that one job, now's a great time to reevaluate that and make sure that you have a backup for those people or a backup to the backup, especially in a pandemic world. Unfortunately, we've all experienced people that have been ill. Absenteeism becomes an opportunity. And the last thing you want is for somebody to be sick or non-available and they have a critical role at the EOC. So please consider that. Same thing with the process. If you have that one way of doing something, now's a great time to look outside the box and look at other ways of whatever it may be of accomplishing that mission. Preparation and critical infrastructure was a hard lesson I think we all learned and that we've spoken on today during Winter Storm Uri. So if you have those essential personnel that are tied to the EOC, now's a great time to look at resources like alternative power, alternative IT sources, water, making sure that they have what they need. Danielle mentioned it at the beginning of this panel, making sure that they have what they need to be successful and to contribute successfully to the EOC. The last thing you want is for them to go down. I know many of us probably experienced that where we had essential personnel completely without power, without water, or without internet services, and we're not able to be part of the team during a very critical moment in the state of Texas. So look at those resources now. There's some really inexpensive, robust programs that you can recommend to your people that are affordable online, and I would recommend taking a look at those. The other thing is emergency supplies, making sure that your people know how to prepare themselves and prepare their homes. I know we talked about that throughout the year. There's a lot of communication that goes around about being ready, but it's not surprising to know that there's a few people out there that probably don't heed those directions and that advice. So just reassure that they do have what they need to sustain themselves at home, especially in a virtual world that we're in now. And then most importantly, and finally, is manage health and wellness, especially for those that work around the clock at the EOC. We want to make sure that people get breaks, take breaks. If your people are like ours, our people don't tap out, especially during disasters and emergencies. So you have to sometimes mandate that people take a break, even if it's for an hour, and to go get some sunshine or read a book or do something that's anything different than manage a disaster is really important, because you want to make sure people stay not only physically healthy, but mentally healthy as well. And that they're able to contribute when you need them most. Also, in a virtual and a pandemic world, not only are they managing work at home, but they're probably also managing their homestead, especially if they have somebody that's sick. So that can become overwhelming at times as well. So consider that in your health and wellness plans. So it was a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you for having us. Great to be with you. Please let me know if you have any questions. I'll go ahead and turn it over to our next speaker, Sam Miller with TDM.
Howdy, my name is Sam Miller. I work with the Operations Technology Group, and our job is to make things a little bit simpler in the field. Our current goal is to find effective ways of getting information that's needed. And so let's go to our first slide, where we're going to talk about some technology that's not just groundbreaking, but it is something that is very helpful in what we do. Web forms are a fast, efficient way to get the proper information that those who need to make decisions can get. The web forms that I've got listed here are ones that we currently utilize, and I want to go through each and every one of them. And if for no other reason for you to know that those exist, that these are ways that we get information. Think about it like this. If someone were to send out an email, and in that email give a list of items that they need specific information on, everybody's response back would maybe list those items in different orders, and maybe not with the uniformity that's needed for making decisions. By having web forms and implementing quick, efficient designs that are mobile friendly, we can make forms that allow the pass-through of information that's needed in a timely manner. The very first one that we have to talk about here is the State of Texas Emergency Assistance Registration. The STEER program also can be found at steer.tdm.texas.gov, is a web form that's primarily utilized for those who might have limited mobility or communication problems, or might have any problems with transportation during an evacuation style event. This is a pre-registration form. They can put their information in, and local governments can then pull that information and know who in their communities might need to have some assistance in an evacuation, should an evacuation be needed. So the STEER program is one of those that's very important. And if you know someone who meets some of these criteria as having limited mobility or communication barriers, or needs medical assistance during an emergency event, or someone who might need transportation assistance or personal care assistance during one of these evacuation events, steer them on over to steer.tdm.texas.gov. Now, the next one I'm going to talk about is ETN, and it's more of an awareness thing. ETN, the Emergency Tracking Network, which was brought up earlier in a previous slide, the Emergency Tracking Network is a program that the state of Texas utilizes when we have an evacuation or a shelter operation. The evacuation operation with ETN allows for jurisdictions to train personnel to put wristbands on folks who are evacuating, along with their assets and pets, so that throughout an evacuation, we'll be able to contact you and let you know when an evacuation order has been lifted, or that you can get back home. It's also important whenever we're evacuating that your pets are evacuating as well, so that they're well taken care of in pet shelters. We put bands on cages or in some way related to the pet, so that later on, if there's ever a question as to who the owner of that pet is, we can look in the ETN network and pull up the owner and be able to contact you so that you can get to your pet. So the ETN tracking network, or the emergency tracking network, is a program specifically designed to help maintain accountability and to allow for jurisdictions to be able to contact you and let you know whenever it's time for you to come back. Now, speaking of jurisdictions and forms that are available to them, this next one is called the STAR form, the State of Texas Assistance Request. Have you ever wondered what happens when your jurisdiction needs something because we're in a disaster and they don't have it and they have no way to get it? Well, this form is the form that they use to ask for help from the state of Texas. A jurisdiction can fill out a STAR form, and the STAR form then gets routed to the state emergency management. State emergency management can then help and fill that request and get it to your local jurisdiction. The STAR form comes from local emergency managers. So if you have a question about the STAR form, you can then contact your local emergency manager or your district coordinator who can help with information on the STAR. The STAR isn't just an open-ended form. It's for a very specific request. So for any style of disaster, whether it's COVID or a winter event or a hurricane or multiple hurricanes, the STAR form is one that can be filled out for any needs for lacking information or lacking infrastructure that a jurisdiction may have. And this last form is one that's called a DSO. It's the Disaster Summary Outline. And the Disaster Summary Outline is very important. It allows for decision makers to be able to allocate resources and the state's response in the right places. When we have a large-scale event, we really need to know where the damage is and where it's where it's heaviest, where we can assist the most. By asking local jurisdictions to fill out the Disaster Summary Outline, the state of Texas knows where to allocate resources and start deploying assets where they're needed most when time is of the essence. Next slide, please. So have you ever needed to go somewhere and to get a good visual representation, you just pull up Google Maps and just look for it just to see where it is? This is where our mapping area comes in and really just revolutionizes how we look at things. It's one thing to see in black and white in letters a disaster summary outline, but what becomes much more visually informative is to see it on a map. And so what I've got here are lists of the maps that we use. The common operating picture is a state of Texas view that our GIS section pushes out to every jurisdiction. And the emergency managers in each jurisdiction then can see the same map that everybody else can, and we can start to layer in the information that's needed. Maybe information that's related to the next 2 points, ISTAT and PSTAT. Individual assistance and public assistance are two of the major recovery categories that are out there. These are two very new tools that we're utilizing now to help gather information. These tools could have been on the first slide because they are web forms, but they're also map forms. These are geo-referenced, meaning that when someone fills out this information, it shows up on a map, on the COP, so that others can see it that need to see it. The ISTAT form is an individual assistance form that allows us to see where folks have had issues when it comes to disasters. If the ISTAT form is implemented in your jurisdiction, then you're going to get to use something called a QR code or a link that allows you to, from a mobile device or a computer, go to a form and fill out what kind of damage your area sustained. That's very important. That information helps us to see the depth of a disaster, just see how big and bad it really is. The PSTAT form is a form that's utilized by jurisdictions to fill out the damages that's sustained to public infrastructure. which as well is very important so that we know how big and bad the disaster is. All of this put together brings about what we call the common operating picture. And we're all sharing this map so that we're all seeing exactly how bad it is in different areas and that we can help our neighbors and help each other out to work through these disasters. Next slide, please. The state of Texas also is building in our UAS, or Small Unmanned Aerial Response. Y'all saw earlier the NIST courses that are being implemented. NIST is a wonderful implementation tool to help with the efficiency of the pilots. What we're wanting to do is make sure that pilots are trained to a standard so that when they're deployed, we can all expect a certain standard and capability set from these pilots. We are utilizing special software right now that when we deploy pilots, when used in a disaster, we are able to coordinate the airspace and allow for pilots from multiple state agencies to fly simultaneously. This is important. This allows us to get real-time imagery to those who need to make decisions, whether it be your local EOC or your state operations center, these district coordinators. These folks all need to know what's going on. And drones allow us to be able to stream live images from a disaster area. We utilize it for things like situational awareness, for damage assessment, and even for the immediate first response actions of the search and rescue. Drones allow for real-time image analysis. In some cases, they can do 3D imaging or stitch together rasters of an area so that you can get a good, clean picture of what disaster has done to the ground. We've also been able to utilize and leverage technology to virtually allocate airspace so that pilots know which areas they can fly and what their missions might be. We can also share obstacles to each pilot so that when you come across a high power line or an obstacle that may not be very visible from an SUAS, you can make a marker on these maps and share it with the other pilots flying. That way, our SUAS pilots are flying in a safe manner. So our SUAS response allow us to see real time what's happening all around Texas and being able to utilize and leverage this software to be able to share the feed to those who need it. And so these are just some areas that we're utilizing a virtual coordination with Texas Emergency Management and allowing us to share the information that's needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Really appreciate that update from the state. It really is impressive. Kind of on the back of the house, RJ and I were chatting that, really in the last 10, 15 years, we didn't have any of these resources available to us to cross coordinate, not just within our own region, but of course across the entire state for these major events that we've had to coordinate. So really exciting stuff. So let's go ahead and bring up all of our panelists. We've got time here for a couple of questions before we start to wrap up our day. And so JJ, I'm going to punt it back to you. We started on UAS, we're ending on UAS, but we're going to come back. Tell us real quick, just a little bit about your work with AI, artificial intelligence, and when do you think that's going to be something that may be useful in a hurricane type scenario?
Conversation from the past panelist in regards to, you see how all that's coming together with the needs of NIST, NIST, and what they were talking about in regards to drones, and then having a training and testing facility. That's the whole thing. This is why we come together, so we can put things together like that. I think that was fantastic. Okay, artificial intelligence. All right, so that's a new grant, National Science Foundation. We're one pod of Texas A&M, Corpus Christi, Del Mar College, University of Oklahoma, South Carolina, and a few others. There was a $20 million grant of a larger $100 million grant. This one in particular is dealing with artificial intelligence and GIS. So it's GIS in regards to machine learning and deep learning artificial intelligence and applying those within GIS and remote sensing, so you can develop models, much like in forecasting and predictive capabilities for both agriculture, environmental science, atmospheric science. So it's pretty exciting. And then doing it in a way where we have a certificate that's a very user-friendly certificate, meaning that you'll be able to, you acquire the knowledge so you can utilize as a user-friendly software to begin applying it as a subject matter expert in another field that may not be computer science. You dig? Dig, should I even say that? Yeah, do you see what I'm saying? So that
that's really exciting.
Yeah, so with like Arc Pro, they have already these applications that are available. So you don't necessarily have to be a big time programmer. You don't necessarily have to be a GIS person. So you take these courses that get you ready, so you can apply the knowledge that you have in your subject matter of expertise as quickly as possible, without having to become, without having to go to take 20 classes. It's kind of very user friendly. So that's our mission, is develop a 5-course program where somebody can get a certificate of that, so they can come in with, look, I talk too much. So there you go.
All right, thank you, JJ. Okay, let's see. Next question. So Garrett, you talked a little bit about the enhancements that we've done for patient tracking. As the ports emergency manager, I'm constantly looking for, how do we make sure that if we have a regional type emergency, we can make sure that we're tracking our people. So just as a general statement, are we better today because of the pandemic and our ability to coordinate virtually, especially across the region?
I absolutely think so. Unfortunately, it's forced us to become better with virtual coordination, since we can't be in person as we are used to in the past. I think this benefits us significantly because it reduces the risk of not only the general public, but the critical responders and emergency managers to keep us safe during this type of event, but still able to give us the ability to do our job. And I think that as we have more tools available to us, and as technology progresses, it's just going to get easier.
Thank you. And last question to Joaquin. We love our HEB partners. This conference, is a brainchild of a couple of really special folks, and we couldn't have ever done it without the leadership of HEB, stepping up as a continued supporter. So tell me this, is there anything that keeps your guys up at night thinking about the upcoming season?
Thank you for that question. Thank you for your compliment. It's our pleasure. So 2 things really is one, from an emergency management standpoint, is going to be related to critical infrastructure sustainability, especially around power, water, fuel. We learned a lot of lessons during Winter Storm Uri, and so we're making sure that certain things that happen never happen again, and that we can sustain our facilities, especially those that are not on generation, that we have a hardened plan for those facilities. And then second, I think for me also personally is continuous improvement. I think everyone on this call and all the panelists have done an amazing job, in including the state of Texas, of responding to the pandemic. But one thing that I've learned over the years is we're always going to have to be better at what we're doing now. And so there'll be another disaster, another emergency that's going to demand us to be better than we were in 2020 and even now. So just how we can continuously improve. Thank you.
Great, that's a wonderful message. And thank you to all the panelists that joined us for this last group. Just as we start to wrap up the conference, we have a final presentation that I have the honor of introducing. We are going to have a quick update from our partners at Coastal Bend Disaster Recovery Group. For those of you that have joined us in the past, you kind of had a chance to watch their progress over the years, and we felt that it was fitting to bring them one more time, just to continue to see what great things we're doing as a region, as a collective body of community stakeholders and partners. And so CBDRG was created in 2015. It was in response to flooding events in Nueces and Jim Wells County. And there was a group of community leaders and emergency managers who really wanted to create something that was sustainable and that was a trusted fiduciary agent that was fully focused on long-term recovery. Prior to the development of Coast of Bend disaster recovery, each time we had an event, we would be starting from scratch. And so we were always well behind the curve and fundraising and case management and collaboration and really trying to meet the true identified needs of the community and those that were a survivor still seeking assistance. And so with that, I'm excited about introducing back again our Executive Director, Christopher Brandt, and he's got a message for us and going to share a little bit about a really neat project that's nearing completion in Refugio. Following the video, we're going to have some last comments from RJ, so please stick around. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Christopher Brandt, Executive Director for Coastal Bend Disaster Recovery Group. And I would like to just say that CBDRG is excited and honored to be part of the 2021 Coastal Bend Hurricane Conference. As the long-term recovery group here in the Coastal Bend, CBDRG is a cooperative body that is made up of representatives from faith-based, nonprofit, government, business, and other organizations cooperating and working together within our community to assist individuals and families who lack the resources to recover from disaster on their own. As a regional permanent long-term recovery group formed in 2015, I would like to update you on the progress being made here in the Coastal Bend. It's been 3 years, 8 months since Hurricane Harvey, and CBDRG has spent $7.7 million in construction to date. We have also been able to utilize over 165,000 volunteer labor hours at a labor savings of over $3.1 million. And with that, CBDRG has been able to rebuild 62 homes, replace 77 manufactured homes, and has completed 160 major repairs here in the Coastal Bend. Through the Coastal Bend Disaster Recovery Group Unmet Needs Roundtable, the coalition has completed 347 major home repairs, has replaced 145 manufactured homes, and has rebuilt 104 homes at an obligated cost of $21.5 million here in the Coastal Bend. During our long-term recovery efforts from Harvey, the local communities were faced with other disasters, including Imelda, COVID-19, and of course the most recent, the Texas severe winter storm of 2021. Coastal Bend Disaster Recovery Group received 774 volunteer labor hours from Mennonites Disaster Services plumbers. With their help, we were able to assist 70 families here in B, Jim Wells, Nueces, Refugio, and San Patricio with their recovery by restoring water or fixing leaking pipes. CBDRG will continue the winter storm recovery assistance with the plumbing and repairs after FEMA registration concludes next week. Thank you.
Here we are, realizing that long-awaited day of dedicating the first 13 homes of these 23 house builds. I could cut out a square block of hope and joy right now and hand it to you because it's palpable in the air this morning. This is not just one organization able to do this. This takes a community coming together, each one with their gifts, finances, administration, coordination. It's been an amazing thing bringing people together. Ultimately, God gets the glory, and so that's who it belongs to.
We were there at the very beginning,
And we, in partnership with the Coastal Bend Disaster Recovery Group, formed that foundation that Mennonite Disaster Service could link directly into. They bring tremendous capability to our region and skills. What they lack is the connection to the community. And that's exactly what Coastal Bend Disaster Recovery Group and Catholic Charities could provide. It's a namesake of Coastal Bend Disaster Recovery Group that says we're all better together, and in fact, that's what it was. And as we did it, other gracious donations came in to make this all possible. And there's a number of groups, faith-based and private donations that made this all possible.
Thank you, moderators, panelists, for your insight and time. I've had a great time this afternoon or this morning with this conference. I'd like to thank also the audience for joining us. And I'd also like to thank our sponsors. Once again, without them, we couldn't have this this event in this manner. Our lead sponsor, of course, is HEB. Our Category 5 is Port of Corpus Christi Authority. Category 4 is Chenier. Category 3 is AEP Texas. Category 2 is Allegiance Mobile Health and Spa Glass. Category 1, City of Corpus Christi, Nueces County, LEPC. Valero, Bill Greehey Refineries, CTEH, Emergency Response. And then our tropical storm sponsors are Crowder Gulf, Driscoll Children's Hospital, and Texas State Aquarium. Once again, the questions and answers will be addressed and published on the Coastal Bend Council of Governments website. That'll be under the Homeland Security Department for that. I would also be remiss if I did not thank those that worked with us, the committee from the Coastal Bend Emergency Managers Association. There is a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes that a lot of you probably may not ever see, but I owe a gratitude to all those members of the committee that helped us out. With that, I'm going to give you back the rest of your day, tell you that this was a great event for the 2021 Coastal Bend Hurricane Conference Multiple Storm Challenge. Thank you all very much.